Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Was in Love with Ibara. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Man, just think about it. Next year will officially be UA. Students Tetsu practically cheered on the walk home from school. We still have to actually get accepted, metalhead. You know getting into that place is super hard. Takage immediately chided him. The two may have been friends for years up until this point, but she never really understood how the guy managed to stay so energetic about things that weren't certain. Speak for yourself. The silver-haired teen shot back. Didn't you say that your aunt was going to give you a recommendation? Aunt Mimiri may be helping me out, but even with a recommendation I would still have to take an exam. She answered back. Although the chance of her making into the school of her dreams through recommendation were pretty good, it certainly wasn't a guarantee. Not only was the recommendations exam apparently much more difficult than the regular one, but she'd be competing with students who were way better connected and probably more powerful than her. Well, with your quirk you're probably going to get in anyway. I'm gonna have to up my training regimen if I want to stand a chance. And you're gonna have to actually study for once. All that training would just go to waste if you can't even pass the written test. Low blow dude. The silver-haired teen practically deflated. The young duo continued on their regular path as usual until it came time for them to split up. Although they went to the same school, their houses were in opposite directions of one another. Tetsu gave Takage a quick wave before heading off, leaving the girl to make the rest of her journey home by herself. On a regular day, Takage's trip home would have simply involved the girl taking a few main roads through Saitama Prefecture and passing through the local shopping center. However, today was not one of those days. As luck would have it, a villain had chosen today of all days to cause some mayhem at the shopping center and the area was completely blocked off. Much to her own annoyance. Deciding not to wait on the local heroes to get the job done, the green-haired teen chose to take a shortcut. Taking a left turn where she normally would have kept on going straight, Takage strolled a little further down the road until she came up on a small alleyway that led onto the next street. She had found this place a while back but decided against making it part of her daily routine. This was mainly due to the fact that it was a known gathering spot for the local vagrants. Thankfully, those types of people usually only occupied the area after the sun went down to avoid getting arrested. It wasn't long before the girl found herself walking through this infamous alleyway and apparently luck was on her side seeing as there seemed to be no other signs of life. Takage wouldn't describe herself as a nervous person by any stretch of the imagination, but even she was smart enough to be on her guard in place like this. Barely halfway through the dark and foul-smelling passage, a loud crashing sound in front of her caught her attention. The green-haired girl quickly went on her guard and reached in her uniform pocket for the pepper spray that her dad forced her to carry on her person, holding it out in front of her just to be safe. It was then that Takage spotted the source of the sudden disturbance. A good 20 meters directly in front of her was the unmistakable sight of a person lying on the ground. A slight coughing sound emanating from his mouth let her know that he was still alive. Against her better judgment, the green-haired teen threw caution to the wind and quickly made her approach to the individual to check on them. Most people probably would have chosen to just walk right past him, pretended that they didn't see anything and went on with their lives. But Setsuna Takage was not most people. Not only did she want to be a hero, she was a decent human being. And she wasn't about to just walk past someone who needed help. In a few short steps, the girl was quickly on top of the person and finally got a good look at them through the small amount of light that was present in the alley. Nothing struck her as out of the ordinary besides the dirty white hoodie and a pair of bright red shoes on their feet. The person was also laying on their side so she couldn't actually see their face. "Hey, are you all right?" Takage asked the person as she knelt down and turned them over onto their back, finally getting a good look at their face. And to say that she was surprised would certainly be an understatement. She doesn't know exactly what she had been expecting, but Takage was certainly thrown off by the person's face. It was a boy, one that was definitely around her age. He had a few freckles on his face and she could see patches of bright green hair poking out through his hood. If it wasn't for the fact that his face was covered in a layer of dirt and he smelled like weak old trash, she would have said that he was pretty cute. God damn it, Setsuna, this is not the time for that. She mentally slapped herself to get focused. "Hey, are you okay?" the girl repeated once again, this time shaking him a bit to see if that would work. There was a beat of silence before a slight groan exited the boy's mouth. Takage let out a breath that she wasn't aware she was holding, seeing that he was still responsive at the very least. Barely a second later, the boy's eyes fluttered open, revealing a set of green orbs that reminded her a bit of emeralds. Those green eyes lazily looked at her for a brief moment as the recognition finally set it. And in an instant, the previously unconscious teen flung himself up and backed away from her while sliding his body across the ground. Whoa, easy there, tiger," Takage said while putting her hands up in a non-threatening, defensive manner. That wasn't enough to stop the boy from crashing into a pile of trash on the nearby wall, however. "Who are you?" he asked with a noticeable redness on his face. But before Takage had a chance to respond, something strange happened. Without warning, the pile of garbage around him lifted off of the ground and began to float in midair. Telekinesis? Hush, she thought. Twom sorry, I don't have any money on me. The boy quickly covered his face with his arms. Judging by how quickly he took up a defensive position along with the way he was stuttering, the guy was terrified. Hey dude, calm down, I'm not trying to mug you. She attempted to reassure him. But you need to relax, your quirk's going haywire. With the green-haired boy slightly dropped his hands and looked at her confusion before noticing the garbage floating around him. Takage couldn't quite place the look that he had on his face while he gawked at the flying objects, but something about it was definitely weird. Hey, it's all good. I'm not here to hurt you, she told him in an attempt to calm him down. Who are you and what do you want? My name's Takage, she answered. I don't want anything. I was just passing through the alley when I saw you hit the ground. I'm not gonna hurt you. He upturned his gaze and looked around to see if what this girl in front of him was saying was the truth. How did I end up here? That's a good question. Takage gave him a pointed glare. Do you mind turning your quirk off? It's making the smell worse. She motioned to the still free-floating bags of garbage and cardboard boxes. Instead of a response, she watched as the boy took a few deep breaths, presumably to calm himself down. After a few seconds of that, everything around him dropped to the ground with a loud thud. Better. Takage smirked. Twom sorry. What are you apologizing to me for? She quirked an eyebrow at him. Sorry, it's a habit. Okay, she gave him a questioning look before getting back on track. Are you alright? You just passed out a second ago. Just before the boy could say anything, the sound of his stomach grumbling cut him off. This being more than enough to cause his face to redden more than what it already was, if that was even possible. A pain grimace grew across his face while he clutched his abdomen to hide his shame. Takage was quick to take the hint and reached inside one of the side pockets of her backpack before fishing out a granola bar that she didn't eat during lunch. Here, she said as tossed it towards him. I think you might need that more than me. Somehow the boy barely managed to catch the granola bar before it hit the ground. He paused for a moment as he looked at it and then back at her. I couldn't. It's fine. She waved off rather nonchalantly. It's all I have on me, but it should make do. Thank you. Don't mention it, she said with a smile. The girl watched the boy as he quickly ripped open the wrapper and practically inhaled the granola bar in a single bite. Takage failed to mask the look of bewilderment on her face at the sight of it. It was almost as if the boy hadn't had a thing to eat in days. Better, she asked him. The nervous teen looked away in embarrassment before giving a reply. Guys, thank you. Good. She let out a small breath. Now that you have some food in your gut, do you think that you're okay enough to talk? The boy simply nodded as he wiped the crumbs off of his mouth. So that's your name? Midoriya, he said in a low tone that Takage was barely able to catch. Well, Midoriya, you want to tell me what a good-looking guy like you is doing in this dark and smelly alley, she said with a grin and a teasing expression, trying to come off as non-threatening as possible. The boy, now identified as Midoriya's face, flushed once again before opening his mouth, but quickly closed it and scrambled onto his feet. Twom sorry for bothering you, Takage-san. I greatly appreciate the food, but have to go, the boy said with a low bow before scurrying off down the alley in the direction she just came from. Hey wait, she beckoned, but it was already too late. The green-haired, mystery boy was gone before she knew what else to do. Takage simply stood there for a moment and thought about what to do next. Going after him was probably a bad idea, and calling the police or a hero would have been equally pointless. A part of her wanted to make sure that the guy was okay, but she had a feeling that he didn't want to be around anyone. The girl couldn't help but wonder what exactly happened to cause someone her age to wind up hungry and in some dirty alley in the middle of town, but she doubted that she would ever find an answer. Instead, the girl simply shrugged it off and made her way out the alley to continue her journey home. Takage ended up never telling anyone about this one-off encounter, and in a few weeks' time, she would have forgotten all about it. Little did she know that she would be meeting the boy again very soon. The long-awaited day had finally arrived, the first day of school. Not just any school, the illustrious UA, the top hero school in all of Japan. Getting to this point was definitely not easy. After months of hardcore studying and training, Setsuna Takage was one step closer to achieving her dream of becoming a pro hero. She would be lying if she said that she didn't feel the least bit intimidated about beginning her journey, but this was no time for her nerves to get the better of her. Man, I've never seen you so nervous. A smiling Tetsu joked at her expense. Whatever, metalhead. Takage slightly pouted before marching off and making her way into the building. It didn't take long for Takage and Tetsu to find their assigned homeroom, Class 1B. The girl paused for a moment at the door to shake her nerves out. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of students were going to be in her class. She had no doubt that she would be making a lot of friends relatively soon, but the air of mystery around the whole situation was a bit unsettling. Pushing those thoughts aside, Takage opened up the door and her eyes immediately scanned around to see if anyone else showed up. There were 5 students already in the classroom and in their seats. A girl with orange hair and some sort of side ponytail, a guy with green skin and what looked like knives on his face, a guy with black hair and a white headband, a blonde kid who reminded her of a weasel for some reason, and another girl with brown hair and some kind of bob cut. Before either of the 2 students could say anything, the orange-haired girl stood up from her seat and made her way over to them. Hello, I'm Itsuka Kendo. It's nice to meet you, she smiled at them with a polite bow before extending her hand out. How's it going? I'm Setsuna Takage, the green-haired teen greeted back before motioning over to her friend. And this is Tetsu. Takagi noticed the look of confusion that crossed the girl's face and wasted no time in confirming her suspicions. Yes, his first and last names are the same. Oh, Kendo simply said before extending her hand out towards the silver-haired boy. Nice to meet you. You too. Tetsu shook her hand. I look forward to learning with the both of you. Same. Our teacher was here a bit earlier but had to leave to take care of some business. He wanted me to let everyone know that he'll be back by the time class starts. Cool. The two of them nodded before heading to their assigned seats. Just like in middle school, Takagi and Tetsu were seated right next to one another. The boy in seat 13 and the girl in seat 14. As time went on, the rest of the students began filing in one by one. There were a few interesting characters from what she could tell, like the one guy whose head looked like a giant glue dispenser and the other who was literally a human speech bubble. But no one seemed any more strange than what she was used to. From what she could tell, pretty much everyone was present and accounted for minus one person. Every seat in the class had been filled except for the one on her left in the row in front of her. Barely a minute before the bell rung is when the last student finally showed up. At the sound of the door opening up, everyone's attention was immediately directed towards the class entrance. And in walked a boy with green hair and freckles. Kendo wasted no time in giving him the greetings she gave everyone else that walked in, and Takagi felt her eyes lingering on him for a few seconds longer than what they should have. The girl couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something about the guy seemed really familiar. She took a second to look him up and down, but she was drawing a blank. Taking in the boy's features, she tried her damnedest to figure why she felt like she knew him from somewhere. But nothing was coming up. Before her mind could think about it any further, the green-haired boy made his way over to his seat, his eyes scanning across the classroom presumably to get a good look at the rest of the students. But something strange happened. When the boy's eyes glanced over to her, Takagi noticed a slight moment of recognition cross his face. It lasted only a second before he looked away and quickly sat down in his seat. That was weird, the girl silently thought while her eyes drifted over to him. Does he know me from somewhere? I feel like I've seen him before. Takagi didn't get a chance to ponder over this any further before the school bell finally rang. And almost immediately after, the door opened up once again, this time revealing a large man with white hair and sharp teeth dressed in a red and black outfit. Greetings, students, my name is Sekijiro Kan, the man announced in a deep and rough-sounding voice. A few of you might have heard of me, or remember from your acceptance letters, but I also go by Vlad King. He continued while setting a stack of papers down on the desk at the front of the class. Takagi knew that UA's Heroes course was taught by pro heroes, but she herself had never even heard of the guy before. Before we start, I just wanted to let you all know that this is my first year teaching. So just like the rest of you, this will be a learning experience for all of us. I like to think of myself as fair and reasonable, but don't test my patience, he told them with a slight scowl. This was more than enough to intimidate a few of the students. Now, we have about 30 minutes before the opening ceremony is supposed to start, so let's all take some time to get to know one another. One by one, I want you all to introduce yourselves to the class. Tell us your name, where you're from, what your quirk is, and anything else you'd like us to know. One by one, the students gave their introductions. Everyone seemed pretty chill for the most part, and Takagi was certainly glad that it looked like she wasn't in a class full of assholes. In no time and came her turn to speak her piece. How's it going, everyone? I'm Setsuna Takagi. The girl beamed with confidence. Like Tetsu here, I'm also from Saitama Prefecture. I call my quirk Lizard Tail Splitter. Do you mind explaining? The furry guy with glasses next to her politely asked. Sure, she nodded. Pretty much, I can detach and control any part of my body at will. It's pretty scary when you first see it, but it makes for some pretty fun jokes. That's pretty cool. Tsubiraba, the guy with brown hair directly in front of Tetsu commented. With her part over, Takagi sat back down and let the class continue on. The next few students introduced themselves, but Takagi found herself particularly interested in the next one to speak for some reason. Greetings, I'm Izuku Midoriya, the boy announced in a slightly nervous tone as he stood up from his seat. I'm from Shizuoka and my quirk is telekinesis. Greetings, I'm Izuku Midoriya, the boy announced in a slightly nervous tone as he stood up from his seat. I'm from Shizuoka and my quirk is telekinesis. A moment of realization hit Takagi like a freight train once those words finally set in. In the blink of an eye, memories from that fateful afternoon almost a year ago came flooding in. It was him, it had to be. There was no doubt about it. That's why he looked so familiar. Wait a second. The boy with the white headband, now identified as a waste, suddenly blurted out. Green hair, telekinesis. You wouldn't happen to be related to the psychic sisters, would you? His question gaining a few curious looks. And no, sorry. I get that a lot though. Midoriya shyly rubbed the back of his head. I wouldn't doubt it. Another student chuckled. With that out of the way, the green-haired boy quickly sat back down as the next student gave his introduction. However, for the remainder of their time in the classroom before heading to the school auditorium, Takagi found herself repeatedly stealing glances at him. How could she not? She was 100% certain that this Izuku Midoriya was the exact same boy that she met in that alley all those months ago. Granted, she couldn't remember his face too well, but there aren't a lot of people with green hair, green eyes, freckles, and telekinetic quirks walking around. And if it wasn't for his slight stutter along with the brief look they shared, she wouldn't have thought much of it. But there was one thing that Setsuna Takagi was absolutely certain of. She definitely needed to talk to this guy. Orientation went about as normally as one would expect for the incoming class of first years. The students of 1B received the full UA welcome and were introduced to a few of their WIB teachers. Everyone had to do their best not to fangirl too much at the thought of being taught by some pretty famous pro heroes. The only weird thing, however, was that their sister hero class, 1A, wasn't present for the ceremony. Apparently, their teacher had them doing something else that must have been more important. Following the official welcome and their mandatory guidance counseling session from the pro hero hound dog, the students made their way to the cafeteria for some much-needed lunch. You know, I thought our first day here was going to be more exciting, said Tetsu as he and Takagi walked around in search of a table. Yeah, it's definitely not what I was expecting. The green-haired girl shrugged. The duo strolled around the packed cafeteria for about another 30 seconds before Takagi spotted a mop of green hair out of the corner of her eye. She turned her head a bit further and sure enough, sitting all by himself was the object of her curiosity for the last few hours. Hey, why don't we go sit with him, she suggested while pointing over to their new classmate. You think he'd be cool with that? He doesn't strike me as the talkative type. Oh, I'm sure he wouldn't have a problem with it. She gave him a toothy smirk. Without missing a beat, Takagi and Tetsu made their way over to the almost abandoned table. The girl couldn't help but feel her heartbeat elevate a bit with each passing step. She really had no clue what she was going to say to him, or if he even wanted to talk to her at all. He'd been pretty quiet so far throughout the day and she had a feeling that wasn't extremely social. But the logical part of her mind was being overwritten by the curious side. Hey, are these seats taken? Takagi asked with a friendly grin. Midoriya upturned his gaze and immediately felt his cheeks heat up when the two of them made eye contact. That small reaction was more than enough proof for Takagi to let her know that he recognized her. Although she wanted to just come right out and ask him about that day in the alley right then and there, she knew better. Especially with Tetsu around. No, you can sit here if you'd like, he said in a low tone while averting his gaze. All of a sudden, the boy grabbed his tray and began walking away. However, he barely made it 2 steps before Takagi called out to him. Did you not want to sit with us? She asked while arching an eyebrow at him. He looked back at her with a confused expression. I didn't mean we wanted the whole table, I thought we could all just eat together. You want to sit with me? He looked to his 2 classmates as if he was having a hard time comprehending what she was saying. Yeah, Takagi grinned back. Oh okay, sorry. The boy quickly apologized before sitting back down at the table. If Midoriya had her curiosity before, now he had her full attention. Something about that was weird, and not in a good way. I'd be happy to eat lunch with you guys. Sweet, thanks man. Tetsu wasted no time in taking the seat directly across from him, completely ignoring the awkwardness of the last few seconds. Your name's Midoriya, right? Yes, and you are Tetsu-san. He trailed off for a moment as the 2 green-haired teens shared a quick glance. Takagi-san, right? We sure are. So Midoriya, how have you been liking UA? So far Metalhead here says that there hasn't been enough excitement. Well, it's only the first day. I'm sure things will pick up once we get into the swing of things. Before Takagi had a chance to respond, a familiar female voice interrupted her. Hey, is it alright if we sit with you guys? Everyone shifted their gaze over to see the orange-haired girl, Itsuka Kendo, along with the gray-haired girl, Ryuko Yanagi. Yeah, sure, the more the merrier, right? Tetsu waved them on before anyone else could say otherwise. Damn, the more people we have here, the less I can get Midoriya to talk, Takagi thought while keeping up her own inviting grin. Thanks, Kendo said with much gratitude. Alright, let me see if I remember everyone's names. Tetsu, Takagi, Yanagi, and Midoriya, right? She asked while pointing to all of them individually, earning a set of approving nods. Oh man, you have a better memory than I do. I still barely know half of our class. The silver-haired teen groaned. Well, we'll get a better chance to remember everyone's names this afternoon. Kendo shot back. Oh yeah, Kan-sensei did say that we were doing something after lunch, didn't he? Any ideas on what it might be? Takagi looked around the table for some possible insight. No clue. Kendo shrugged after taking a sip of her coffee. Well, no point in worrying about it until then. True, she agreed. So, since we have a whole hour to chill out, why don't we get to know each other a bit since we're all going to be in the same class? Like I said earlier, I'm Setsuna Takagi. My quirk is Lizard Tail Splitter and I love dinosaurs and movies. The girl beamed. Well, I'm Itsuka Kendo. My quirk is Big Fist. I can enlarge my fist to a pretty gigantic size. It's nothing super flashy though. I love martial arts and coffee, pretty much. I'm Tetsu. I can turn my entire body into steel and I love working out. The silver-haired teen cheered while pumping his fist in the air. The 3 of them looked over to the other 2 occupants and waited for one of them to speak up. Both Midoriya and Yanagi looked at each other for a moment before the gray-haired girl decided to speak up first. I'm Ryuko Yanagi and I call my quirk Poltergeist. I can lift any object that's equal or less than my own body weight. I also like scary movies and surfing the internet, she said in a low tone that was barely above a whisper. While all of this was going, Midoriya was mentally kicking himself for not having one of his hero notebooks on him. His classmates all had such amazing quirks and he was having a hard time containing himself. On top of that, the fact that he was actually a part of a conversation, with girls no less, was still a bit hard to process. It was only after a few seconds that he realized that everyone was now waiting on him to reintroduce himself. "Ooh, right." He lightly blushed while scratching his cheek. "Now that I think about it, he's actually kinda cute. And he looks way better without the layer of dirt on him," Takage thought while watching the shy teen. "I'm Izuku Midoriya. On my quirk is telekinesis," he stated rather nervously. "Oh cool, so you two pretty much have the same quirk." Kendo was the first to point this out. Guess you could say that." "So, which one of you do you think is stronger?" Tetsu asked while taking a bite out of a piece of steak. Takage was quick to scold the brashness of her longtime friend with a not-so-subtle elbow to the arm, even if she wanted to know the answer to that question herself. "Dude, come on, don't be an ass." "Sorry, it's fine, Tetsu-san." Midoriya waved off. "Well, how much weight are you able to manipulate?" Midoriya-san, a lazy blue eye, looked at the boy. For a second, Midoriya was slightly unnerved by the stoic gaze the pale girl was giving him, but he was able to regain his cool in time. "I haven't really T-tested my M-maximum in a while, but the last time I tried, I was able to pick up an old bus. Though, I'm not really sure how much that is." The boy awkwardly laughed. A silence fell over the table after that, and Midoriya suddenly found himself shrinking under the gaze that his new classmates were giving him. Was he not supposed to say that? Was that not normal? Did it come off as him bragging the last thing he wanted was for people to think of him as stuck up? Maybe he should have just fudged the truth a bit. What he neglected to tell them was that he barely managed to get the thing a meter off the ground before suffering a pretty severe nosebleed and passing out for a few hours, or the 3 days of headaches that followed. "Midoriya-san," Yanaga's pale stare was trained right back onto him. "That's incredible. You think so?" Of course, very few people with telekinetic quirks have that kind of strength. "Hey, I have a question." Takage spoke up, hoping to get some more information on this mystery boy. "Does that mean that you can fly?" "Well, sorry, is it acceptable to me for sit with you?" A nervous voice in a weird accent suddenly cut him off. The group redirected their attention towards the other end of the table, and what they were met with was the horned girl from their class, Pony Tsunotori. If Midoriya remembered correctly, she was the American exchange student in their class. Her Japanese was pretty good, but her grammar did have some room for improvement. "Many tables here are taken and I wish to not want to sit alone," the blonde-haired girl continued with a slight blush. The students looked around at each other in confusion for a brief moment before Midoriya spoke up. "It's no problem, Tsunotori-san. There's plenty of room," the boy responded in her native tongue. This caused Tsunotori's eyes to blow open at hearing someone else speak to her in a language that she could actually understand perfectly. "You speak English?" "Not very well, sorry." "Oh man, this is such a relief," the girl said before taking the open seat next to Takage. "Thank you so much, Midoriya. I was worried I wouldn't find anywhere to sit." "It's no problem." "Wow, Mop Top, you're certainly full of surprises, aren't you?" Now it was Takage's turn to flex her foreign language skills a bit. "You speak English too? That's awesome." Tsunotori practically cheered at this new development. "Hey, as cool as it that you all know another language, I'd like to know what's going on." Tetsu scowled at Takage. "Maybe if you paid attention in class, you would know what was going on, metalhead." The girl immediately shot back. Takage's statement earned a few laughs from most of everyone else at the table. After that, the conversations went on as normally as one would expect from the new classmates. Although he tried his best to be engaged in the conversation, Midoriya was still having a difficult time adjusting to actually eating lunch with other people for once. Up until this point, no one had ever wanted to be seen talking to him, let alone sitting at the same table with him. And the fact that he hadn't been to school in months didn't help either. It was certainly an interesting change of pace, but there was still a need to get used to something like this. PE grounds after lunch. Following their lunch, the students of 1B were told to get dressed in their gym uniforms, head out to the PE grounds and wait for Can to show up. Midoriya ended up being the first one done and was nervously waiting by himself. Everything so far today had been going good. Actually, it was better than good, it was great. Today was the first time in years that he didn't have to worry about getting beat up or ridiculed for just existing. It was almost as if the boy had traveled to a completely different universe. He still couldn't shake the nerves that he was feeling ever since waking up this morning. But at the very least, he didn't have to chronically look over his shoulder every 5 seconds. Before his mind could descend any further, a female voice broke the broccoli-headed teen's train of thought. "Well, it looks like the two of us are the first ones done." Takage flashed Midoriya a toothy grin as she walked up to him. "Yeah," he nervously replied. The girl placed her hands on her hips and leaned in a little too close for his comfort. "If my memory is correct, you owe me a granola bar." "Oh, so you do remember after all." His face shifted into a downcast expression. Oh yeah, there was this entire issue that he needed to worry about. Seeing the girl when he first walked into the classroom this morning was definitely a shock for him. A part of Midoriya hoped that she didn't recognize him as easily as he recognized her, but her previous statement told him otherwise. "Not gonna lie, it took me a minute after seeing your face. But not a lot of people are running around with freckles and green hair." She smirked once again. "I got a ton of questions, but we can save those for some time after class." He tilted his head in confusion. "Let's hang out after class sometime." Maybe we can get smoothies or something, she asked before realizing that the boy might be tight on cash. If you don't have enough money then, you want to hang out with me? His confusion grew even deeper. Of course I do. Why, man, you two sure get dressed fast. The voice of Tetsu interrupted his question. The two teens looked behind them to see the silver-haired boy along with Juzo Honuki and Yanagi making their way over to them. It was only now that Midoriya realized that the gray-haired girl walked with a rather peculiar posture, not unlike that of a zombie. What's up? I don't think we got a chance to properly introduce ourselves. I'm Juzo Honuki, but you guys can just call me Juzo. The lipless teen extended his hand out towards the two brunettes. How's it going? So, what were you guys talking about? Tetsu inquired. Oh, nothing. I was just trying to convince Mop Top here to go out on a date with me, Takage said as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Midoriya's face immediately lit up like a Christmas tree and he suddenly found himself without the ability to produce actual words. Instead, the boy just gawked at her as if she had grown a second head. BFFT Takage tried holding in her laughter. Oh man, you're too easy. She patted Midoriya on the shoulder while trying to hold herself up. You should probably get used to her saying stuff like that. She's always been like this. Well, you guys seem like a pretty fun batch of people. Honuki chuckled at his classmates' antics. Before long, the rest of the class showed up along with their teacher. No one had any idea what they were about to do. But if the fact that they were in their gym uniforms was any indication, then it was probably going to be something physical. Alright, listen up. This afternoon, we're going to be doing something called a quirk apprehension test, Ken announced to the group of wannabe heroes, earning more than a few confused looks. You all remember the fitness test that you had to do in middle school, right? All of the students minus Tsunotori nodded in confirmation. To put it simply, we're going to be doing the same thing. Except unlike your middle school days, for this test you will be able to use your quirks as you see fit. The white-haired man continued. A brief moment passed before a fit of murmurs erupted amongst the 1B students as everyone tried to process this information. However, before anyone had a chance to get any more information, Ken spoke up once again. Midoriya, out of everyone in the class you got the highest score on the entrance exam if I'm not mistaken. 19 pairs of eyes suddenly shifted onto the green-haired boy and Midoriya wanted nothing more than to shrink and jump into a bottomless hole. He already knew that he did relatively well on the entrance exam, but it wasn't like he got first place. Nice going, Mop Top. Takage playfully elbowed him on the arm, causing him to blush even more than what he already was. Here, Ken tossed the green-haired boy a white soft ball. While standing inside that circle, I want you to throw that ball as far as you can with your quirk. Anything goes as long as you don't step outside of it, he said while pointing to the area. All Midoriya did was nod and shakily walk up to the designated spot. Everyone watched as the boy tossed the ball up and down his hand a few times as he considered what he was going to do. Okay, this shouldn't be too hard. All I need to do is just carry the ball as far as I can. I think my limit is still somewhere around 400 meters, he thought before taking in a deep breath and floating the ball in his hand. The entire class stood silent as they witnessed the green-haired teen simply extend his hand outward, sending the ball flying at a pretty decent speed. By the time it stopped, it was further away than what most people could see. 400 meters even, Ken announced while showing everyone the score on his phone. Damn, that's far as hell, Subiraba whispered. How am I supposed to compete with that? That's over 10 times further than my maximum range. Yanagi thought. This is going to be pretty awesome. Another student cheered. I want to see what you all are made of, so don't half-ass these tests. I expect each and every one of you put forth maximum effort. Don't let me find out that you're slacking, you won't like the result. Yes, Sensei, most of the students cried out in response. Following Midoriya's attempt at the ball throw, the rest of the students lined up and took their own turns. Overall, the rest of the class did pretty well in this event. Kendo came in second place with a respectable 359-meter throw. Monoma, while using Kendo's quirk, came in third place with a 300-meter toss. And Takage got fifth after death etching on of her arms as far as she could before throwing the ball the rest of the way. Long jump. The second event was the standing long jump. Based on what Midoriya had seen of his classmates' quirks so far, very few of them had abilities that would really give them an edge in this one. Just like before, the green-haired boy was the first one called up, along with Takage to get their attempts over with. So Mop Top, are you gunning for first place? Takage smiled as the two lined up at the starting point. I'm just going to do my best, he responded. You two are good to go whenever you're ready, Ken announced. Takage was the first to move. The green-haired girl death etched her torso from her legs and floated herself over to clear the sandpit. A few of the students watching couldn't help but feel a slight bit of vomit making its way up their throats, but it only took a second for them to let that pass. As for Midoriya, the boy simply used his quirk to float over sandpit, gently setting himself down right next to the girl. Oh, so you can fly? Takage questioned after watching that display. I wouldn't really call it flying. I can use my Q quirk to move myself around, but it's pretty hard to do and I can do it for too long, he explained while bashfully scratching his cheek and looking away from her. It's still a pretty good skill to have, she shot back. 50-meter dash. Midoriya was the next student called up to do his run along with the horn girl, Pony Tsunotori. The two teenagers got in their starting positions and the young American flashed him a quick smile before crouching down to all fours. Midoriya was curious to see how the girl would navigate this obstacle, but for the moment he had to focus on himself. Go, the robot shouted, signaling them to begin. Everyone watched a cloud of dust suddenly appear as Tsunotori took off like a rocket. The horned teen moved so fast that barely anyone saw her cross the finish line. In the other lane, Midoriya simply used his telekinetic ability to fly across as fast he could. He was able to move at faster speeds with relative ease in short bursts. It was when he tried to prolong his airtime that the headaches and nosebleeds started to occur. Lane 1 3.89 seconds. Lane 2 4.36 seconds. The robot announced the times for Tsunotori and Midoriya respectively. Not bad, Midoriya. Your power is pretty awesome. The girl said to him. TT, thank you, Tsunotori-san. The boy blushed after being praised for his quirk, something that he still wasn't used to. The rest of the events went off without a hitch. Takagi felt pretty confident with herself and her performance, but didn't want to jinx it. Once everything was said and done, Kan gathered up all of the students to announce the final placement for the test. Alright, I've compiled up the scores for you all, so let's see how well everyone did. The white-haired man spoke while slightly fumbling with the controller. The 1B students collectively held their breath as they waited to see what the verdict was. Of course, everyone had given the test their all, but they were still curious as to how well they did or did not do. Final result. 1. Nito Monoma. 2. Jiroda Shishida. 3. Itsuka Kendo. 4. Izuku Midoriya. 5. Setsuna Takagi. 6. Ibara Shiozaki. 7. Tetsu. 8. Pony Tsunotori. 9. Juzo Honuki. 10. Kajiro Bondo. 11. Yui Kodai. 12. Tagaru Kamakiri. 13. Tosai Tsubiraba. 14. Yosu Uwase. 15. Ryuko Yanagi. 16. Shinkai Bara. 17. Shihei Kiwaro. 18. Nyanjiki Shota. 19. Manga Fukudashi. 20. Kinoko Komori. The short brunette girl let out a defeated sigh after seeing her name at the bottom on the list. Kendo did her best to console the downtrodden teen while silently cheering that she managed to get third place. The reason I had you do this test was because I wanted to see how creative you all are. Kan began before Shishida raised his hand. Sensei, can you please elaborate? The furry teen asked. Of course, the man nodded. Real-life situations are never going to be cut and dry. Sometimes you'll have to use your wits to achieve victory over an opponent who has an advantage over you. The point of this test was to get you to use your quirks creatively and start thinking about the different ways to apply them. No one had a quirk perfectly suited to every situation. That's how it goes when you're out in the field. That makes a lot of sense, Tetsu said while nodding his head. But one thing I want you all to take away from this little exam is not let these scores discourage you. Those at the top of the list, don't get complacent and think that you're above anyone else. Those at the bottom, use this as a learning experience to motivate you. It's only the first day, you still have a lot of room for improvement, all of you. Yes sir, half the class cheered. Alright, that is all we have for you guys today, you're all free to head home. Come prepared, because tomorrow we're gonna hit the ground running. Yes sir, the students repeated before finally being dismissed. After getting dressed and packing up his things, Midoriya was making his way towards the front gate when the voice of Takagi caught his attention. Yo, Mop Top, she called out. The boy turned around to see the green-haired teen along with Tetsu and Yanagi. He was curious about why the girl called him out, but didn't really have a chance to think about it before she was literally right in front of him. So, are we still on for that smoothie? She asked. She's so close. I'm sorry, Takagi-san. The boy bowed along with his apology. I have to get back home. My mom needed me to help her around the house. That statement was definitely enough to confuse the green-haired girl. Home so he did have somewhere to live, and his mom so he wasn't by himself. The entire day she thought the guy was living at some shelter or something, which you couldn't blame her considering the last time she saw him. But now she had a lot more questions she wanted to ask. Fine, but I still have questions. To understand, he simply said before giving one final bow and making his way home, leaving Takagi's curiosity even higher than it was a second ago. Katsuki Bakugo was absolutely furious. Not only did he get third place on Aizawa's bullshit quirk test, but he lost out to that black-haired bimbo and the half-and-half bastard. He was hoping to come into class and show everyone who the top dog is right out the gate. But now he would have to wait for his next opportunity to assert his dominance over those damn extras. The ashen blonde teen barely made it out the front door of the school when he spotted a patch of wild green hair in the distance before disappearing around the corner. There was no way his eyes were playing tricks on him. There absolutely no way in hell that quirkless loser was there. The explosion quirk user shook his head for a second before continuing his journey home. It had been months since he had seen that useless waste of space known as Deku. He doesn't know what happened to him, and frankly he didn't care. For all he knew, that quirkless loser finally got with the program and gave up on trying to be a hero. The following afternoon, the students of 1B were patiently waiting for their first actual heroics class to begin. After all, this class was the sole reason for them even being at this school in the first place. You could almost feel the anticipation in the air as everyone started whispering about what they were going to do. However, the hopeful heroes of tomorrow didn't have to wait long before a certain blonde-haired man made his appearance. I am nearly everyone's heart stopped. Coming through the door like a normal person, All Might announced with as much bluster as one would expect. Holy, it's All Might, a waste blurted out, earning a disapproving look from Shiozaki. Oh man, I heard he was supposed to be a teacher here. But I thought it was a joke. Ibara followed. Isn't that one of his retro costumes? Fukadashi's speech bubble read. That is definitely not how a normal person goes through a door, Monoma silently said. Takage herself was having a hard time containing her excitement along with the rest of her classmates. It's not every day that you get to be in the same room as the #1 hero. The large man standing in front of the classroom was a living legend. Midnight was still her all-time favorite hero, but All Might was definitely in her top 5. While everyone was busy gawking at their new teacher, the girl's eyes flashed over to Midoriya. Out of all the students, he was the only one not saying anything. She could only see a part of his face from where she was sitting, but his expression looked stale if she had to put a word to it. After a short introduction, All Might announced that they were going to skip the training wheels and get right into battle training. Although there were a few concerns, most everyone was more than willing to jump right into class. With the click of a remote that came seemingly out of nowhere, the blonde-haired man instructed his students to get into their costumes and head to training ground beta. In the blink of an eye, everyone hopped out of their seats and made their way to the locker rooms, excitement practically dripping out of their pores. In no time, the students of 1B were waiting outside the front gates of the training area. Well, everyone minus a certain freckled teenager. Sorry everyone. The boy apologized after being the last one to show up. Man, Mop Top, you certainly picked function over fashion, didn't you? Takage grinned at him while taking in his outfit. To say that Midoriya's costume was simple would be a fairly accurate assessment. The boy was dressed in a plain black long-sleeved, hooded t-shirt and black pants tucked into a pair of black combat boots. He also wore a black, military-style protective vest over the t-shirt with a pair of fingerless gloves. The whole ensemble screamed stealth. And don't look at me. Takage couldn't help but notice how tightly the shirt clung to the boy's arms. He couldn't tell based on how baggy his school uniform was, but the shy, green-haired teen definitely knew his way around a weight room. Oh, your mama likes. She grinned outwardly. On the flip side, Midoriya was doing everything he could not to look at his classmate's costume. Takage was in a rather fitting blue bodysuit. Like his, the overall design was simple along with some orange guards on her wrists and a matching blue domino mask. But the outfit did leave little to the imagination in terms of her figure. I like it, Kendo said about the boy's costume. It suits you. You don't really strike me as a flashy kind of guy anyway. Thank you, but actually it's not complete yet, the boy awkwardly admitted. Really? Yanagi asked, wondering what else he could possibly need. Yeah, I sent my request form in late so my helmet wasn't completed in time. That's super bad, Tsunotori added. Alright, young students, this afternoon you will all be participating in 2-2 indoor, anti-personnel battle drills. The man known as the symbol of peace announced in his boisterous tone while reading an index card. You will draw lots to decide the pairs. One group will be the heroes, the other will be the villains. The heroes must get to the objective while the villains must defend the artificial bomb that you see on the monitor before you. Are there any questions? We're just going right into it. Subiraba raised his hand. Like, we're just gonna nosedive right into fighting each other. Yeah, it feels like we're skipping a few steps, Ibara added. The best way to learn is through experience, All Might answered. With no further questions and their objective pretty clear, the students drew lots to see who would be paired up with whom. When it came his turn to pick, Midoriya ended up with Tima. He searched around for a moment before Tetsu revealed himself to be his partner. Midoriya had no problem with this matchup. The silver-haired teen seemed like a really nice guy and his steel quirk was definitely something to be feared. Now without further delay, let's see who the first matchup will be, All Might said before pulling out 2 labeled balls from a box that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Tima will be the villains, and Timi will be the heroes. Alright, Takage suddenly cheered next to Yanagi after hearing their group get called. I hope you guys are ready to lose. The green-haired girl flashed a grin towards the 2 boys. TCH, yeah right. Tetsu scoffed with casually waving her off. I like the enthusiasm, the pro-hero interjected. Tima will have 10 minutes to hide the weapon and get prepared. Timi, wait outside the training building and await my signal. Yes, sensei. The students answered in unison before exiting the monitoring room. So you can pretty much just move anything with your mind, right? Tetsu asked Midoriya as the telekinesis quirk user carried the paper mash bomb up the stairwell. Despite its size, the thing barely weighed more than 30 kilograms. Well, that's the simple way to put it. Then this will be an easy win. I don't think it's a good idea to underestimate our opponents, Tetsu-san. The silver-haired teen practically deflated at the boy's words. Yeah, you're right. You're friends with Takage-san, right? What can you tell me about her quirk? After the brief explanation about the girl's abilities, Midoriya was almost at a loss for words. Not only was Takage's power incredibly versatile, but its applications were nearly endless. If it wasn't for the fact that they were in the middle of a training exercise, he would have already started cataloging this in his notebook. With about 2 minutes left to spare, Midoriya was finally able to piece together a good enough strategy on how to best protect the bomb. The plan was rather simple and completely depended on what their opponents were going to do. But with Tetsu's reassurance, it had a pretty high chance of success. So Yanagi, how did you want to play this? You seem to be rather friendly with Tetsu-san. What do you think he would do in a situation like this? Well, I've known the guy for years, Takagi said before a quick laugh escaped her mouth. Knowing him, he'll just want to meet us head-on and get into a slugfest. He thinks with his fists more than his actual brain. I see. The gray-haired girl nodded. And even though we have similar quirks, Midoriya-san is much stronger than I am. He seems like he would be quite the obstacle to deal with. Yeah, you're right. The sharp-toothed teen tapped a finger to her chin before the light bulb went off. Oh, I have a plan, but I need to know how exactly your quirk works. All right, students, begin. The voice of All Might boomed over their earpieces. Outside the building, the two girls wasted no time in putting their plan into action. Right as they entered, Takagi detached one of her eyes and used it to scout ahead. Even with all the training she had been doing over the last year, her range was limited to about 50 meters right now. But that was more than enough to give her and her partner the edge. Do you see anything yet? Well, they're not on the first floor, I can tell you that, she responded while sending her free-floating appendage up another floor. Takagi was glad that she didn't have to use any more pieces other than the one eyeball, seeing as any more would just drain her stamina further. Barely a few meters into the second floor, Takagi spotted Tetsu wandering around the halls. Luckily he hadn't spotted her, but judging by the look on his face, he was definitely on the hunt. She didn't see Midoriya anywhere, so it was safe to assume what their strategy was. More than likely Tetsu was sent ahead to waste time while his partner kept the bomb safe somewhere else. With a pretty decent grasp on the situation, the lizard tail splitter user quickly recalled her eyeball to save some energy. Alright, Metalhead is on the move on the next floor and I don't see Mop Top anywhere, so it's safe to assume that he's holding the bomb somewhere else and Metalhead is going to be a distraction. A brief moment passed while Yanagi looked at the girl stoically. So do you just give everyone you meet a weird nickname? Only if I like you, Takagi smirked. What would mine be then if you were to give one to me? Takagi looked the girl up and down for a second while taking in her appearance. Pale skin, gray hair, weird posture, a motionless face. She had the perfect nickname for her partner. Ghosty, let's just hurry up, we don't have a lot of time left, the girl flatly stated before making her way up the staircase. I thought it was pretty good. Takagi shrugged. The girls proceeded to advance to the next floor and started trailing the silver-haired teen. They made sure to keep their distance as to not alert him of their presence. 10 minutes left, All Might suddenly shouted in their ears. All right, here's the plan, Takagi whispered to her partner. As soon as he turns the next corner, we bum rush him and put the capture tape on him. Metalhead is strong as hell, but his reaction time is pretty garbage. After that, we get him to tell us where the bomb is, and then the two of us use that information to blindside Midoriya. Okay, the gray-haired girl nodded. They trailed Tetsu for another 30 seconds and sure enough, right when the boy turned onto the next hall, the two girls rushed him. The silver-haired teen barely knew what hit him when Takagi detached both of her arms and used them to grab him by the ankles and take his feet out from under him. Yanagi quickly followed up by wrapping the capture tape around his wrists, but Tetsu was able to call out to his partner before being defeated. Midoriya, they're both on second floor. Tetsu has been captured. All right, Metalhead, where's your partner? Takagi asked him in an aggressive tone. Like I'd ever tell you, he shot back before turning his head in mock disgust. Takagi paused to look at him for a moment while considering her next move. Sure, he was captured, but that didn't mean that he was out of play. And with their time running out, she needed as much information as she could get. Without a second thought, the green-haired girl decided to test the waters on what was and wasn't allowed by shoving her fingers up the boy's nose. Oh, what the hell are you doing? Stop, the boy shouted in agony at the feeling of her nails digging into his nostrils. Nope, not until you tell me where your partner is, she told him. The struggle continued on for a good few seconds before the boy finally relented and gave in to her demands. While this was happening, Yanagi wasn't exactly sure on what to do. Okay, he's on the 4th floor. Are you lying to me? She dug her fingers in a little deeper. No, damn it. Satisfied with that answer, Takagi released her grip on his nose and wiped her hands off on his hair. Alright, Yanagi, let's get moving. Back at the viewing room, everyone watching blanched at the sight of Takagi's impromptu interrogation. And how effective it seemed to be. There was something else. It was a good idea. Can't argue with you there. It was a pretty dirty move though. Isn't there an old expression about picking your friends' noses? With time running out, the two girls ran up the steps and made their way to the 4th floor. When they arrived, they were met with large open area. There was nothing on the entire floor besides a few support pillars and one Izuku Midoriya patiently waiting in the middle of the room. Alright, Mop Top, where's the bomb? The girl asked him. Sorry, Takagi-san, but I'm not telling you. Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. There's 2 of us and 1 of you. She attempted to taunt him. Well, I just have to hold on until time runs out, right? I like the confidence. She smirked before a rather devious idea popped into her head. How about we cut a deal? He quirked an eyebrow at her. If you tell me where the bomb is, I'll let you touch my ass. What? Midoriya's face erupted into a shade of crimson at the girl's words. With the green-haired teen thrown off guard, Takagi detached both of her arms and sent them flying at him. In his momentary stupor, Midoriya wasn't able to react fast enough to avoid getting hit. Yanagi, go look for the bomb. I'll deal with this. Okay. The gray-haired girl nodded before heading towards the staircase. After lifting himself up off the ground, Midoriya quickly got his wits about him and focused on his opponent. Thankfully, he had planned for something like this, so he was ready for some type of altercation. The reason he chose this floor was because of all the loose debris laying around. Granted, nothing that could be used as ammunition was necessarily lethal, but there was enough to knock someone on their butt for a few minutes. Just as he lifted up a couple of old crates on the other side of the room, his vision suddenly went dark. Evidently, Takagi had wrapped her hands around his face. As soon as everything went black, the crates dropped to the floor. So either he can't control things that he can't see, or the shock made him lose focus. The girl wondered. She didn't get a chance to analyze the situation a bit further before Midoriya tore her hands off of his face and held them in place to prevent her from taking them back. 3 minutes left. Shit, she cursed only a second before her earpiece activated. Takagi-san, the bomb's not in here. I searched through both floors and it's gone, Yanagi announced. What she turned her attention back to her opponent. Where the hell is it, Mop Top? The only response she got was the wooden crates from before colliding with her left side and knocking her off balance. Without her hands to keep herself from hitting the ground, Takagi braced herself to eat a face full of concrete. However, her untimely lip-locking session with Mother Earth never happened. The girl opened her eyes to see that she was hovering a few centimeters above the ground before upturning her gaze to see that Midoriya had his hand extended out towards her. He stopped me from falling. Are you okay? The boy asked sincerely. Since when is it a good idea to worry about your enemy's safety? Well, we may be opponents B, but we're still classmates, he responded, leaving Takagi speechless for a second. Midoriya decided to keep his hold on the girl until the remainder of the time limit ran out. Takagi did try more than a few times to break free of his grip, but considering she was being suspended in the air by an invisible force, it didn't really do much good. Villain team wins, All Might announced boisterously. Everyone please return to the viewing room for your review. The boy released his grip on Takagi's arms while gently setting her on the ground, while at the same time, Yanagi had just made it back downstairs in time to hear the announcement. What happened? The gray-haired teen inquired. Mop Top got the better of me, Takagi quickly answered. Are you sure you looked everywhere for the bomb? I searched the entire floor. It's gone. The two girls turned their heads towards Midoriya for some type of explanation. The boy shrunk under their gazes and took a shaky step back before telling what they wanted to know. It's on the roof. Are you serious? Takagi deadpanned. Of course it was. Where else would they hide it but on top of the building? To be honest, it didn't even occur to the girl to check the place from top to bottom. Although she was impressed at Midoriya and Tetsu outsmarting her, she was mentally kicking herself for overlooking something so obvious. Well, I guess I might as well use this as a learning experience. An excellent showing, you four, All Might told them with a thumbs up after their return to the viewing room. You all did admirably well for your first exercise. Passing marks all around. The blonde-haired man then turned to the rest of class. Who do you all think is the MVP of this scenario? Honuki and Monoma raised their hands at the same time, but the lipless teen was the first to speak. Either Midoriya-san or Takagi-san. Takagi-san's plans were well thought of and executed for having to come up with everything on the fly. And Midoriya-san's plan to keep the bomb away from the two was effective if not a bit reckless. Monoma was quick to follow up. I agree with Honuki-san. For the sake of the scenario, Midoriya-san floating the bomb to the roof was a good idea. But in real life, putting such a dangerous weapon out in the open like that is way too risky. Takagi-san's idea to hold off Midoriya-san while Yanagi-san searched for the bomb was also good. But they had a mismatch when it came to quirks. It would have been more effective if they switched roles. Kendo was next to speak up. They're really not pulling their punches, Takagi and Midoriya both thought. Man, kids these days are smart. All Might's sweat dropped. Excellent points from all of you. Now, let's see who our next matchup is going to be. The man proceeded to pull out two balls labeled C and D. The villains will be young Kendo and young Kamakiri. The heroes, young Honuki and young Ibara. The rest of the battle training went on relatively uneventful. Despite his best efforts to keep himself composed, Midoriya couldn't help but make a few comments here and there about how awesome his classmates' quirks were. He was particularly interested in Shiozaki's vines and Fukudashi's comic projection. He also wanted to know how Yanaga's telekinesis was different from his own. Before they knew it, the students of 1B found themselves heading home after another successful day of class. Today was one of the few days of the week that Midoriya wasn't heading straight home. Instead of his usual route, he was on the train to Saitama Prefecture. Hey Mop Top, I didn't know you took this train home. Takagi tapped him on the shoulder, startling the telekinesis quirk user in the process. I don't actually, he shyly replied while turning around. So what gives? Where are you going? Tetsu asked. That's Saitama Prefecture. Takagi gave him a wide grin and a weird gaze after hearing that. What a coincidence, that's where we live. She pointed a thumb at Tetsu and then back to herself. Why are you going that way? I thought you said you live in Shizuoka. The boy paused for a brief moment and looked at his hands nervously before working up the nerve to answer. I'm actually volunteering at an orphanage over there. I've been doing it for a while now. Damn dude, that's pretty awesome of you. Seriously, first you saved me from eating shit earlier today in training. Now you spend your free time helping out the less fortunate. Are you just like, made of puppies and sunshine? Takage playfully patted him on the shoulder, causing the boy to blush. Hey, I guess now we can finally get that smoothie you owe me. What? Tetsu gave her a confused look. You were serious about that? Of course I was. She smiled back at him. Not too long after, the three students departed their train and made their way to a smoothie stand not too far from the station. Is this really happening right now? Midoriya internally screamed as walked a couple of steps behind his two classmates. The entire experience was weird for the boy, if he was being honest. He was actually hanging out with people his age. Not too long ago, something like this would have been chalked up to a fantasy for him. I'd like to stick around, but I gotta get home. I'll see you guys later, Tetsu said before heading down the connecting road. I'll see you in the morning. Takage waved. There was a very awkward silence between the two greenettes for the next couple of minutes. Eventually Takage became fed up with this and decided to just get on with her inquiry. Oh my god, I'm actually walking with a girl. So, how much further away is this orphanage? The girl asked, hoping to ease into the conversation. It's like a 10-minute walk. Two have to make a left at the shopping center. Good, I have to take a right up there. But that gives us plenty of time for the two of us to talk. Alright. He nervously shook his head. Look, I'm not gonna ask you everything about your personal life, alright? She started off, hoping to ease his nerves a bit. I honestly don't know what I want to ask. I'm just curious. It's fine, I understand what you mean. Just answer me this. Where'd you run off to after we met? You know it's rude to pull a dime and dash on a beautiful young lady. She sneered in between sips of her grape smoothie. Honestly, I can't remember. Most of that time is just a giant blur, he said, before quickly regretting that he allowed those words to come out of his mouth. That's understandable. The girl shrugged. So besides hanging out in dirty back alleys and volunteering at this orphanage, what do you like to do? Why? Because I want to know more about you, duh. Oh really? He asked with genuine surprise on his face. Yeah, you're a pretty interesting guy. Honestly, there's not a lot to tell. I'm a pretty boring person to be honest. All I really do is study and work out. Yeah, I can see that. The green-haired girl grinned while very obviously checking him out. Midoriya noticed this and absent-mindedly covered himself with his arms to avoid her predator-like gaze. What about you, Takage-san? What do you like to do? He quickly tried changing subjects. Watch movies, learn about reptiles, and be lazy. Oh, the conversation continued on like that for the rest of their walk together. Takage actually did most of the talking while Midoriya just nodded and agreed with most of everything that she said. When the two finally had to part ways, Takage felt pretty satisfied with this impromptu walk home. Sure, she didn't get all of the answers that she was looking for, but it was definitely a start. One thing was clear in her mind though. She definitely wanted to get to know this guy some more. When Takage walked back into her house that afternoon, she was met with silence. Granted, this wasn't an unusual occurrence for her, especially nowadays. But there was something to be said about actually having someone to greet you upon your return. Dad, she called out a couple of times, hoping for some type of response. However, the only answer she got in return was the sound of the wind lightly blowing through the half-open kitchen window. Without missing a beat, the green-haired girl made her way to the kitchen to close the window before heading over to the pantry to grab her favorite dinosaur-shaped cookies. That usually served as her after-school snack. Along the way, she glanced over at the dining room table where her father had left some money and a handwritten note. Had to head over to the lab for some emergency repairs. I probably won't be back until tomorrow morning. Order takeout if you don't feel like cooking anything. Sorry for not texting you earlier, but I forgot to charge my phone. Call me if you need anything. Love, Dad. P.S. If your sister drops by, tell her to stop eating all of my pretzels. Well, at least he decided to leave a note this time, Takage said to herself with a deep sigh. After placing the paper down on the table, she decided not to dwell on it any further. The girl wasted no time in ordering some udon noodles from the shop down the road and nosedived right into taking care of her homework while snacking on her dinosaur cookies. At the very least, no one was going to interrupt her studies. Life at UA really was all that it was cracked up to be, Takage told herself as she made her way through the hallway en route to class. It may have only been the first week of the new school year, but it was pretty apparent as to why UA was considered the top hero school in Japan by so many. Classes like English, math, and world history were about as easy for Takage as they had been in middle school, which didn't bother her one bit considering that she never had an issue maintaining anything lower than in her entire life. Her two favorite classes were heroics, for obvious reasons, and hero art history, but that was mainly because Kayama was the one teaching and it seemed like it'd be the easiest class out of all the others. It also helped that her classmates were pretty easy to get along with. Sure, there were a few over-the-top personalities, most notably a certain blonde-haired weasel by the name of Nito Monoma, but overall everyone seemed to be rather enjoyable. Her circle of friends had even grown a bit since class started. Naturally, she hung out with Tetsu pretty much all day, but Kendo had joined her group as well. The orange-haired girl seemed like the responsible and slightly overbearing type, but she was good people. However, there was one student in particular that Takage just couldn't get a read on. Izuku Midoriya, for lack of a better word, the guy was odd. Not necessarily in a bad way, but the way he acted definitely raised a few curious flags in Takage's mind. First and foremost, the guy was rather shy. Actually, shy probably wasn't really a good word for it. The green-haired boy was particularly standoffish, skittish, and jumpy. He rarely ever said anything and never spoke to anyone unless spoken to first. He definitely didn't come off as rude in any sort of way, but it was definitely weird. The second reason was that after the first day of class, she never saw him during lunch. Practically their entire class sat together when it came time for their afternoon break. But for some reason, Midoriya went missing until it came time for class to start again. And today was no different. Today was a particularly bright and shiny day. The skies were clear and the temperature was just right. After a suggestion from Kendo, almost all of 1B decided to spend their lunch outside instead of in the cafeteria with everyone else. The only people who weren't present at the moment were Midoriya and Monoma. The latter apparently had to run to the bathroom but hadn't returned for a while. Everything was going pretty smooth, that was until the school's alarm went off. The students paused for a moment as the automated voice alerted them a level 3 security breach. What the hell does that mean? Kamakiri looked around. "2 think it means that someone's managed to get past the school barriers," Shota said nervously. "Oh shit, do you think some villains got into the school?" Kaibara's comment was enough to cause the Hero Course hopefuls to start panicking. In the blink of an eye, the students abandoned their food and started rushing towards one of the nearby doors. As expected, the future heroes started shoving one another to get inside to safety. "Everyone calm down," the voice of Kendo shouted, causing everyone to stop in their tracks. The students all turned their heads towards the orange-haired teen who was glaring at them in an annoyed fashion. "Panicking like a bunch of scared children is only going to make things worse." "She's right," Takagi added on after freeing herself from in between Kiwaro and Bondo. "I don't know what's going on, but our best bet is just head back to the classroom and wait for Kansensei. No doubt everyone inside is panicking as well, and adding on to it won't help the situation. Let's just head back to class in a neat and orderly fashion, please," the orange-haired teen commanded. "We need to figure out where Monoma and Midoriya are too," Takagi stated while looking around. "Does anybody have any clue where those two disappeared to?" "I'll shoot Monoma a text," Suburaba said while pulling out his phone. "Tell him to head back to the classroom. We can deal with finding Midoriya after we make sure that everyone is safe," Kendo ordered the Solid Air user. The entire class nodded before quickly making their way back to their assigned classroom. They were pretty far away from the cafeteria where most of the student body was before the alarms went off, so they managed to avoid the bulk of the panicking crowd. Within a few minutes, they were able to make it back without losing anyone along the way. And luckily, Monoma returned without any issues. After a quick head count by Kendo and Takagi, they were only short one person. "Damn, we're still missing Mop Top." Takagi clicked her teeth. "Does anyone happen to have Midoriya-san's number?" Kendo looked around, earning a few head shakes. As if on cue, the door opened up and the students turned their heads to see none other than their missing classmate. The boy was slightly panting, which meant that he must have ran back. "Midoriya-san, where the hell were you at?" Takagi asked him. "To apologize," the boy said with a quick bow. "I didn't really know where to go, so I thought coming back here was the smartest choice." "Do you know what's going on?" Honuki inquired. "Some reporters got past the front gate." "That's it," Tetsu deadpanned, along with a few other students. Although they were glad that it was anything too serious, a few of them were more than a bit miffed that they had to cut their lunch short for something so minor. About 30 minutes after making it back to class, Kan finally showed up to see if his students were okay. "I'd like to commend you all for your quick thinking and making it back here safely. It was a madhouse down there, especially in the cafeteria. But you all managed to keep your cool and avoid any incidents." The white-haired man smiled towards his students. "But because of this unforeseen interruption, the principal informed me that we're going to adjust our schedule today. We were going to introduce you to rescue training this afternoon along with 1A. But we'll have to save that for another day. So what are we going to be doing instead?" Sir Kendo raised her hand. "A couple of things, really." The man held up 2 fingers. "First things first, you all need to pick a class rep and vice rep. Second, we're gonna head down to the PE grounds and all of you will do some impromptu quirk training along with myself and Midnight." Nearly everyone's ears perked up after hearing that. "You all can spend the next 30 minutes deciding on who the class reps will be. I need to go prepare for training," Kan told them before exiting the room. The moment the door closed behind him, the class practically erupted with students stating their case as to why they should be class reps. Although there were a few more boisterous students like Monoma and Tetsu, a few others decided to just keep their mouths shut. Namely Midoriya, Kodai, Yanagi and Bondo. Takagi herself didn't feel strongly about it one way or the other. Even though being the class rep would look good to hero agencies in the future, it seemed like more trouble than what it was worth. "Let's just put it to a vote," Honuki suggested. "I agree," Shishida followed up. "I mean, that's a good idea, but wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves?" Shota said curiously. "It just means that whoever does get picked is the right choice. Plus, heroic integrity and all that." Takagi shot back, hoping to get this over with as soon as possible. With a few agreeing nods, the students of 1B all pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote down the name of who they thought the honor should go to. After about 5 minutes, the votes were passed up to the front of the class and tallied up for everyone to see. Votes: Kendo 6, Takagi 4, Monoma 2, Honuki 2, Shishida 1, Kamakiri 1, Uwase 1, Ibara 1, Fukadashi 1, Tiwara 1. Wow, I really don't know what to say. Kendo lightly chuckled while rubbing the back of her head. Seriously, Takage agreed after recounting the votes just to make sure that her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. The green-haired girl didn't even vote for herself, so the fact that she got 4 votes was definitely a surprise. It was safe to assume that Tetsu was one of them, but the other 3 were a complete mystery to her. Well, you two did take charge and made sure that everyone got back to class safely. Honuka-san's right, Shishida stated. If it was not for the 2 of you, we might have gotten caught up in the debacle with the rest of the students. Yeah, Kendo, you kind of reminded me of my older sister with how you were barking out orders. Oase joked. After a brief congratulations to the new class rep and vice rep, Cam returned and instructed the students to get changed into their gym uniforms and head down to the PE grounds. Once everyone made their way down to the field, the students wasted no time in getting right into their training. The majority of everyone was spread out across the area participating in various activities. Kan and Kayama were supervising their efforts and making sure that everyone was staying safe. But that didn't stop the R-rated heroine from taking the time to chat with her favorite student. How are you doing over here? Setsuna the black-haired woman asked. Aunt Nimura, Midnight Sensei, the girl corrected herself. I'm fine, I just needed to take a quick break is all, she said after reattaching her left arm back to her body. Her stamina was still her biggest issue when it came to her quirk. Good to hear. Kayama smiled. How have things been going for you so far? I know we haven't had a chance to really chat since the school year started. Have the others been treating you well? Yeah, everyone's been pretty chill except for a few people, Takage said while pointing over to certain blonde-haired kid. And Tetsu's here so it isn't too bad. Glad to hear it. All of a sudden, the pro-heroine leaned in a bit further and adopted a devious grin on her face. So I noticed you stealing glances at that Midoriya boy during my class the other day. Has my sweet little niece already picked out her boy toy for the year? Oh my, I can't wait to tell your father about this. Takage couldn't help but smirk at the woman's attempt to get her flustered. That kind of teasing may have worked on her when she was little, but it had been a long time since she let something like that get to her. I mean, he's definitely cute, and from what I've seen he cuts quite the figure, but he isn't very social. Yes, I've noticed. Kayama backed off a bit. If I remember, he was the boy that Vlad had to fight Shouta on getting in his class. Who? Eraserhead, the homeroom teacher for 1A. From what I heard, Shouta was going to put him in his class, but Vlad made a fuss about him trying to take the top 3 applicants for himself. He put on quite the display during the exam. Seriously, Takage turned her head over to steal a glance at Midoriya. The boy was currently by himself at the far end of the field while floating a few softballs in the air. Yes, he probably would have placed first if he didn't use up so much of his time helping out other applicants. Wow, indeed. Anyways, I'll let you get back to it. See you in a bit. Takage gave a quick wave to the woman before turning her attention back to Midoriya. I should try to talk to him after class is over. While Takage and Kayama were wrapping up with their conversation, Midoriya was hard at work trying to find a way around his own shortcomings. For the last 30 minutes he had been doing his best to manipulate multiple objects at once, but he ended up hitting a wall. Although the boy could lift a pretty decent amount of weight, his biggest problem came with trying to apply his quirk to more than one thing at a time. Recently he had been able to increase this limit to 6 objects that were within his weight range, but that was it. Midoriya-san, a voice whispered from just behind him, causing the telekinesis user to jump. He turned around and was met with the stoic gaze of Ryako Yanagi. He hadn't talked to the gray-haired girl much since class started. If he was being honest, her almost lifeless gaze unnerved him quite a bit. Why, Yanagi-san, the boy said after recomposing himself. Kan-sensei said that the 2 of us should train together since we have similar quirks. Oh, I guess that makes sense. Yes, the girl nodded. What are you working on now? Ooh, well, I'm working on the amount of objects that I can control at once. The boy pointed over to the pile of softballs in front of him. You can join me if you like. That's fine. Yanagi agreed before turning her focus to the pile of balls. Midoriya watched as the girl extended her arms out and used her quirk to lift 12 of the softballs into the air almost effortlessly. She can manipulate that many at once. The boy gawked at the display before turning to her. Yanagi-san, you're amazing. I can barely control 6 of them and here you are manipulating twice that amount. Your quirk is awesome, he practically cheered, which threw the girl off. So far in class she had never seen him speak with this much emotion before. Really? Yeah. But you're so much more powerful than me. I would think that you'd be able to manipulate more objects than I could based on how much weight you said that you can lift. Midoriya took a second to rub the back of his head in embarrassment. Yeah, well, it's one of those things that I'm just not very good at. At least not yet. And you can fly as well. I wouldn't really call it flying. It's pretty much just me using my quirk on my body. Honestly, it's pretty hard to control and makes me lightheaded if I do it for too long. The gray-haired teen's face shifted into pensive expression. Actually, her face barely moved at all except for a slight furrow of the eyebrow. What's wrong? I'm not able to use my quirk on myself, but you are. I guess our abilities are just different by nature. I guess so. Indeed. We should probably stop goofing off before one of the teachers notice. The girl suggested before turning her attention back to the balls that were still floating in the air. During their entire conversation, Midoriya hadn't even realized that she was still controlling the softballs. He doubted that he could do something like that. Splitting his focus to that level was beyond his current ability. It became evident to the green-haired boy that Ryoko Yanagi was someone that he could learn a lot from. Things went on rather normally for the next 20 minutes or so. That is until a shirtless man with what looked like a yellow excavator claw on his head came sprinting down to the PE grounds. Kayama. Majima, what's up? The R-rated heroine asked her coworker. Why haven't you two been answering your damn phones? Mine is charging back in the classroom, Ken stated. Mine is in the teacher's lounge. Kayama followed. What the he? Never mind. Come with me. Right now, the support course teacher demanded while waving them on. Let's go. I'll explain on the way. Just get your asses in gear. Both teachers shared a quick glance before complying and taking their leave. Naturally, everyone was confused, but based on the sense of urgency in Majima's voice, it had to have been a serious matter. Kendo, keep everyone here until I get back. Yais, sensei. The new class representative nodded. In the blink of an eye, all three faculty members had vanished behind one of the nearby buildings. A slew of murmurs and whispers began amongst the students before Kendo got everyone to calm down and get back to their training. Something about that entire exchange definitely seemed fishy. But whatever it was, the teachers probably had it handled. Presented with an opportunity to goof off for a bit and get some rest, Takagi made her approach over to Midoriya. They hadn't really had a chance to talk so far today, and now was as good a time as ever. So Mop Top, where were you during lunch? The green-haired girl inquired with a curious grin. I'm sorry, pretty much the entire class was eating lunch together except for you. In fact, the last time I even saw you in the cafeteria was during the first day of class. So what, do you have some secret hiding spot or something? And no, it's nothing like that. He told her, I'm just not really good with crowds. Oh, that's understandable. She nodded. Still, where do you go? You don't have to tell me, I'm just curious. Oh, well Midoriya's response was cut off when Tetsu decided to join their group. So, where do you think Kan-sensei and Kame-sensei ran off to? Who knows, but that other guy sounded like it was urgent. Who was that anyway? Yanagi inquired. That was Powerloader. Midoriya answered the gray-haired girl without a second thought, earning a few confused looks from all of them. He's an excavation hero. Most of his work is done underground and away from cities. Well, that explains why we didn't recognize him. Yeah, he must be pretty low-key. But if he's a teacher here, then he's gotta be strong. I have a question as well, Yanagi said while looking to Takagi. Is Midnight Sensei really your aunt? We're not related, but her and my dad have been friends for a long time. So she's pretty much family. The girl smiled proudly. That's so cool, Midoriya blurted out. The boy showing a level of emotion that neither of his classmates were used to seeing. Right, Takagi smirked back. You know, Mop Top, if you ever want an autograph, all you have to do is come over to my place. We have our family dinners every Friday. The girl's comment making him blush. This caused Tetsu to start laughing. You should be proud, man. It took damn near a whole year for her to invite me over to her house. Well, Mop Top's a lot easier on the eyes than you, so he's the exception. Midoriya's previous blush now intensified to a point where his head looked suspiciously like a ripened tomato. All Takagi could do was laugh at how simple it was to get the boy to lose his nerve. It was easy to see that he was going to be her new favorite target. That does bring up a good point though. The lizard tail splitter user continued after wiping her tears. We should all hang out sometime. Hey, yeah, that's a good idea, Tetsu quickly agreed. How about his weekend? We can invite Kendo too. Sounds good to me. What about you two? The girl looked to the telekinetic users. I have plans this weekend, but I appreciate the offer, Yanagi told them. Takagi's eyes shifted over to Midoriya, who for some reason had an uncomfortable look on his face. Sorry, I don't think I can. But thank you for the invite, the green-haired boy said in an apologetic tone. Hey, no harm done. Maybe some other time. With the conversation pretty much over, the students returned to their training and continued with that for the rest of the afternoon. Kan ended up making it back to the classroom in time to dismiss everyone for the day. But everyone couldn't help but notice that he had a few dirt patches on his costume that weren't there prior to his departure. Whatever caused him and Kayama to suddenly skip out on class must have been pretty important. So how was school today? Inko asked her son while the two of them were in the middle of their family dinner. It was good. I got to see more of my classmates' quirks in action. Well, I'm glad to hear it. She smiled. So have you made any new friends yet? Midoriya paused mid-bite before swallowing. No. That one-word response was enough to make the woman frown at her only son. She knew it was a sore topic for him, but a part of her still had hoped that he would become more social. You know, Izuku, things aren't like that old school of yours. From what you've told me, your classmates seem pretty nice. You should try and mingle with them a bit more. The only reason they're even nice to me is because I have a quirk, was his short reply. There was a notable bit of edge to his voice that the woman wasn't really used to hearing from him. Izuku, breaking news, the television reporter suddenly announced, drawing both of the Greenettes' attention. This afternoon, UA High School was subject to a large-scale villain attack that occurred on campus during a routine training session turned disaster. There has been no word yet from the police or the school on whether or not there were any casualties. But the one thing we do know is that All Might arrived in time before the situation could get any worse. What the hell? In the days following that minor altercation in the hallway, Midoriya seemed slightly more distant than he was before. The green-haired boy was never a social butterfly to begin with. But over the last couple of weeks he had been noticeably more quiet. He still talked to everyone and engaged in conversation, but you couldn't help but notice the cloud hanging over his head. No one in class approached him about the whole Bakugo situation, seeing as the only people who knew about it were the ones that witnessed it. But it was obvious that whatever was bothering him was related to it. Takage decided to just give the boy his space and not pester him about it. As one of the class reps, it was her job to make sure that her fellow students were okay. But as a decent person, she knew when and when not to broach certain boundaries. However, that certainly didn't stop the girl from shooting him a text the Sunday before the big day. Dagaba Beach, this once great tourist destination turned dumping ground, was probably Midoriya's favorite place in the world, which sounded just as weird to him as it would to anyone else. He discovered the place not too long ago, and for the past 7 months it had served as his secret training ground. With all of the loose debris and materials lying around, it was the perfect location to practice using his quirk. What started out as simple movement drills and experiments quickly turned into somewhat of a community service project for the boy. He'd even say that it was a hobby at this point. Sure, there were many other reasons why he had dedicated so much time towards coming here, such as the seclusion and cover that was needed to avoid getting arrested for public quirk use, or the wide array of objects that helped him manipulate things of different weight limits and sizes. What were once gigantic mounds of garbage were now neatly organized pillars and blocks placed strategically across the sand. At some point in the last few months, he had turned the place into somewhat of an obstacle course for him to practice his maneuverability in the air. Unfortunately for Midoriya, had no way of moving the trash to an actual dump or recycling center. The most he could do right now was organize things into neat piles and hope that he would be able to do something about the mess once he could legally use his quirk in public. However, nothing put a smile on his face quite like seeing the beach slowly revert back to its former glory. The green-haired boy was in the middle of moving a few old refrigerators and crates into a pyramid-shaped block when his phone went off on the ground below him. He gave the device a curious look before extending his arm out and levitating it into his hand, swiping his thumb over the lock screen to reveal one new text message. T-Rex, hey, it's Setsuna. T-Rex, if you're wondering how I got your number, it's because Kansensei gave me and Itsuka a list of everyone's in class. I'm not a stalker. Rabbit, hello, Takage-san. Rabbit, is there something I can help you with? T-Rex, yes, and it's a very important matter. Rabbit, what is it? T-Rex, where are you taking me for my victory date after I win the sports festival? If it wasn't for the sand, Midoriya would have certainly shattered his phone. T-Rex, I can only imagine the look on your face right now. Rabbit, that's a funny joke. T-Rex, who said I was joking? Rabbit, oh. T-Rex, kidding D. T-Rex, or am I? Rabbit, so is there something that you wanted? T-Rex, come on man, you gotta learn how to get with the program. Metalhead was way quicker on the uptake. We'll just have to work on your witty banter skills another time. Rabbit, oh. T-Rex, in all seriousness though, are you okay? Rabbit, I'm great. T-Rex, we both know that's not the case. You've been quieter than usual in class. Rabbit, I promise. Takage-san, I am fine. T-Rex, well then, if you're so fine then you'll have no problem hanging out with me this weekend. Rabbit, what? T-Rex, we're hanging out this weekend. Honestly, you don't really have a choice in the matter. Rabbit, why would you want to hang out with me? T-Rex, because I'm going to be home alone this weekend and I'd much rather spend my time with a cute guy rather than laying on my couch and watching old era cartoons. Rabbit, but why me? T-Rex, why not? Rabbit, I don't know how to respond to that. T-Rex, you should be glad that a beautiful young maiden is offering you such a blessing. Most boys would have jumped at the offer. T-Rex, plus I really don't have anything to do and Tetsu is going to be out of town. Rabbit, I'll think about it. T-Rex, I'll take that as a yes. T-Rex, anyway, sorry for bothering you. I'll let you get back to whatever you were doing. Try to not to dream about me too much. Rabbit, goodbye, Takage-san. Before the students knew it, the day of the sports festival had finally arrived. Takage herself was feeling pretty good about her chances. She wouldn't go as far as to say that she was going outright win the entire thing just yet. But the lizard tail splitter user definitely had a fire lit in her soul about getting the chance to prove herself. While the students of 1B nervously sat in their assigned waiting room, you could practically feel the tension in the air. Most everyone was quiet and doing whatever they could to psyche themselves up. Tetsu was stretching in the nearby corner. Honuki and Shoto were playing the guessing game on what they were going to be doing, and Tsunotori was mumbling something to herself in English that Takage couldn't really understand. However, the entire atmosphere changed when Monoma decided to make his presence known by standing in the middle of the room and calling for everyone's attention. Listen guys, I think that we should play it safe the first few rounds of the competition. The copy quirk user stated. What do you mean? Kendo inquired. Think about it. Like Kansensei said, we already know that the first event is going to be an obstacle course around the stadium. We just don't know what exactly those obstacles are going to be. It would be better if we all stayed in a group and helped each other get to the next round. Monomekan does have a point, Honuki stated. I'm not going to say that I disagree, but we don't even know how many of us they'll let get through to the next round. Last year they only let 30 people through, and we have 10 other classes to worry about. Itsuka's right. Tetsu blurted out. It's gonna have to be every man for himself. Plus this a competition, we should be trying to beat each other, not help each other out. Calm down, idiot. Takage slapped the silver-haired teen in the back of the head. Look at it this way. If we play it smart now, then we can have an advantage over the other classes in the upcoming rounds. Honestly, we should be worried about scouting out the completion while we're at it. Would you care to elaborate? Takage-san Shishida asked the green-haired vice-rep. I say that we all hang back a bit and let the other students show off their quirks. No doubt the other Hero Course students are going to try and add on to their newfound fame. On top of that, people are going to be watching them a lot closer than us. That's actually a good point. Knowing Bakugo, he'll come out guns blazing as soon as the race starts. If there are other students in his class like him, then they'll probably follow suit. Midoriya thought to himself. He agreed with Takage's reasoning. Laying low and gathering information on the other competitors would be a wise decision. That's exactly right, Takage-san, Monoma cheered. We can get a leg up on the competition before the second round. All of this scheming seems so dishonest. Shiozaki spoke up. I'm sorry, but I can't participate in such underhanded behavior. Well, I'm all for it. The Wace added on. Why don't we just let Kendo-san decide? She is the class rep after all. And if we are going to do this, it'll have to be a team effort. Honuki stated. 19 sets of eyes locked onto the orange-haired teen as she took a moment to think things over. She didn't disagree with the whole idea, but it was way too risky without knowing how many people were going to get past the first round. How about we hold off on making the decision until we know exactly what we're dealing with, she suggested. Fine with me, a few of the other students echoed. As if on cue, the voice of the announcer spoke to the students through the speaker in the top corner of the room. All students, please report to the parade field. Soon enough, the students were ushered out of the northernmost gate of the stadium and met with the sight of the cheering crowd. One by one, each of the 11 classes were introduced to the world. Naturally, everyone's attention was focused on the Hero Course students, especially those in 1A. But Takage and the others knew better than to underestimate any of the other students. Within minutes, the freshmen were crowded around the event stage, waiting for the festivities to begin. While the students and crowd listened to Midnight's introduction, the nervous tension that surrounded them seemed to magnify with each passing second. Midoriya took a moment to look around the group, only to be met with a slurry of dissenting scowls from various onlookers. It didn't take long for him to notice that almost every student in his class was receiving similar looks. I guess the Hero Course students are the ones on everyone's radar. Now to give the student pledge. Katsuki Bakugo, please come up to the stage, the somewhat inappropriately dressed hero announced. Wait, what? Tetsu accidentally blurted out. That guy's the student representative for this year, Takage asked no one in particular. I'm pretty sure he got the top spot on the entrance exam. Kendo told her. As Bakugo made his way to the microphone, the blonde-haired boy made an obvious effort to bump shoulders with Midoriya along the way. The green-haired boy decided to just pay it no mind and play it off. A few seconds later, Bakugo was up on stage and took a slight breath before scowling at every last one of the students on the field. I just want to say I'm gonna win, the blonde-haired boy said with a level of confidence and nonchalance that pretty much angered everyone both on the field and in the stands. He seemingly didn't care though, as he responded to their shouting with a rude gesture and declaring that everyone was nothing more than stepping stones on my path to the top. After another snide remark about beating everyone, he walked down the steps back onto the field, a look of determination on his face. Well, I can't say that I wasn't expecting that to happen, Midoriya thought to himself. Talk about a major asshole, Takage said with a click of the teeth. Well, at least he's confident. Kendo sarcastically shrugged. Wait, now I know where I recognize him from, Monoma suddenly thought. Thank you, Bakugo, for those inspirational words, Midnight said as she got the crowd's attention back onto her. Not like it would have been a difficult task in the first place. Now, without further ado, allow me to announce the first event. Our competitors will be competing in a 4-kilometer obstacle course back to the main entrance of the stadium. The rules are rather simple, just be one of the first 4 to 4 students to make it across the finish line. Quirk usage is also allowed as long as you don't harm another student or leave the designated course. With that declaration, nearly all of the 1B students turned their gazes towards Kendo. Alright, we're going with Monomasan and Setsuna's idea. We still have a bit of time before the race starts, so let's hurry up and come up with a plan, the girl announced just loud enough for their group to hear. Within a few minutes, the first-year students made their way over to the starting line. Having already gone over their plan, Class 1B decided to stay in one relatively large group. With their strategy in place, they were feeling more than confident that they would all make it into the next round. The moment the horn sounded, the entire tunnel was met with a strong gust of cold wind and series of loud bangs. By sheer luck, the 1B students were just far away enough to avoid having their feet frozen solid by a sheet of ice that magically appeared below them. Midoriya looked ahead towards the edge of the tunnel to see Bakugo flying through the air by propelling himself with miniature explosions, and a kid with two-tone hair skating on the ice. I guess the students in the other hero course have some pretty powerful quirks. Damn, that was a close one, Takage said. Seriously, Kendo agreed before checking on her other classmates. Luckily, no one got caught up in that initial attack. Come on guys, we need to get a move on. Without a moment's hesitation, the hero course students began pushing their way through the crowd. When it became apparent that they weren't going to get through by sheer strength alone, Honuki decided that he had enough of the nonsense and activated his quirk. Nearly all of the students ahead of them began sinking into the ground before Lipless Teen solidified the dirt. "You're the man," Juzo Kaibara complimented his classmate. With the first obstacle out of the way, the 1B students quickly began pushing forward. Everyone managed to stay together in a group minus Shiozaki, who used her vines to navigate her way out of the tunnel ahead of everyone else, and Tetsu, who just took off running to catch up to first place. It didn't take them long to reach the next leg of the race, which pretty much amounted to them having to fight their way through some of the robots from the entrance exam. A good part of the path was already frozen over and some of the bigger robots were immobilized, so all that was left were smaller ones. The ones with the better combat quirks clear a path. "The rest of us will back you up," Kendo commanded. Almost immediately Kamakiri, Fukudashi, Shota, Shishida, and Tsunotori jumped into action and began knocking down anything that came their way. While the three of them were handling that, Midoriya decided to do his part and used his telekinesis to move a few of the robots away from himself, Kodai and Komori. The robots themselves were well within his weight limit, so it wasn't too much of a bother for him. While that was going on, Takage thought it would be a good idea to cover their backs. "Hey Bondo, can you lay down a glue trap once everyone in our class gets by that will slow down anyone who hasn't made it this way yet?" "No problem," the gentle giant of the class said before covering the pathway in a rather thick layer of glue. Back in one of the viewing booths, the members of the school's faculty were watching events unfold with rapt attention. "As expected, most of the group that's gone ahead is from Class 1A, Snipe said as he watched Bakugo and Shadow Todoroki barrel through the last of the 0-point robots left on the course. "Yes, it appears as though their experience at the USJ has kicked them into another gear. Indeed, Aizawakan's students are putting on quite the show. However, it appears as though Kankun's class chose an entirely different route of approach. Not only are they working together, but they are eliminating competition along the way." Nezu smiled. "Let's see how they do on the next obstacle," Hound Dog stated before flipping the screen to a different camera. In no time the students came upon their next trial, which just so happened to be a giant canyon filled with pillars that were spaced out and connected by some relatively thin ropes. There was a fair bit of distance between the Hero Course students and the rest of the pack, but that still didn't leave them a lot of time to come up with a plan, especially since a good amount of students were already making progress across the pit, such as one girl with pink hair who was apparently allowed to use a jetpack. Sony Ideas Awaste looked around. Suddenly, a light bulb went off over Takage's head and the girl directed her gaze over towards a certain patch of green hair. "Mopped up?" "Yes," he responded nervously after being called out. "Flying over this thing should be a piece of cake for you, right?" "Yes," he nodded. "Do you think that you can carry other people with you while you do that?" "It shouldn't be a problem." "That's perfect," Kendo almost cheered after following along with the other girl's train of thought. "Everyone who has a high mobility quirk can just carry someone else over, and those who are being carried will watch their backs." "Sounds good to me," Shota stated. "Midoriya-kun, Yanagichin, you guys have telekinetic quirks, so you're gonna have to do most of the heavy lifting. My weight limit is lower than Midoriya-kun's. The only people I can probably take with me are Komori-chan and Fukudashi-kun. Also, I can't use my quirk on myself to fly," the gray-haired girl stoically replied. "Did she just call us all fat?" Kaibara whispered to Kiwaro. "We don't have a lot of time for discussion," Monoma announced while pointing over to an oncoming group of students who managed to get past Bondo's glue trap. "Midoriya-kun, how many people can you take with you?" "5 at the most." "All right, here's the plan," Takage spoke up. "Mop Top, you take Bondo, Kamakiri, Shota, Kiwaro, and Shishida. I'll carry Itsuka and Yanagi while she uses her quirk to Daisuchan, Komori, and Fukudashi. Pony, use your horns to take Kodai with you." "Sorry, but the rest of you." "We get it," Monoma interjected. "While you guys are transporting people and circling back around, me and Honuki-kun will soften the ground and make it harder for people to get past. We'll come back for you guys, I promise." Kendo reassured the 5 remaining boys, those being Monoma, Honuki, Kaibara, Tsubiraba, and Awase. "If you don't, I'll never forgive you," Awase shouted. "Does anyone have a problem with the plan?" The orange-haired teen looked around for one final confirmation. With no protest, the students wasted no time in grouping up and setting off. Midoriya quickly lifted his 5 passengers off the ground and began moving towards the other side of the canyon. He wasn't too worried about dropping any of them, but he did have to strain a bit to keep his focus. While he was doing that, Takage split herself up into 2 parts. With her top half, she hooked her hands under Yanagi while the girl also used her quirk to float her 2 passengers, and Kendo grabbed a hold of her bottom half. "That's some impressive coordination." Snipe grinned under his mask at how the 1B students were playing this. Although the battle for first place was just as riveting, he couldn't help but acknowledge the other hero class. "I'm actually surprised. Most students are only concerned with getting the top spot and standing out." 13 added on. "Yes, it appears as though 1B went into this with a plan. If they keep this up, all of them would get through with no issue. You have a rather wonderful class, Kankun." "Well, thank you, sir." It barely took a couple of minutes for the first group to safely make it across the canyon. Once everyone was back on the ground, Midoriya and Takage circled around to pick up the rest of their classmates. "Thanks for the assist, Mop Top. You know, if you wanted to, you could have just went ahead of everyone else and fought for the top spot." you probably would have been in first place. Takagi grinned at him as the duo flew through the canyon. Yeah, you're right, he responded. But everyone agreed to do this as a group, and it wouldn't have felt right if I didn't help out. Alwa, you're such a sweetheart, the girls comment, making the boy blush. Once they made it to the other end of the canyon, the two greenettes were surprised at what they came back to. Apparently, Monoma and Honuki combined their efforts and made a giant pit of quicksand in between the remaining 1B students and the rest of the crowd. Even Tsuburaba had a few people encased in bubbles of solidified air. That's not even fair. Takagi laughed at the sight below her. The two were quick to scoop up the rest of their classmates and make the journey back to the other side of the canyon, leaving the rest of the competitors yelling and angrily waving at them. Saitama Prefecture. Hey boss, I didn't know you had a little brother, a black-haired woman with purple eyes said to another with green eyes and dark green hair. What are you talking about? Have you not been watching the UA Sports Festival? No, I just finished catching up on some paperwork, so I haven't had the time to check it out, was her reply. What's this talk about me having a brother? The black-haired woman directed her attention towards the television. On the screen, she watched a young boy with wild green hair and emerald eyes fly across a cartoonishly massive canyon while seemingly levitating some other people along with him. This guy's quirk is like yours. I remember you saying that not a lot of people with telekinesis can fly, and from what they've shown us so far, he's pretty good. What's this child's name? The green-haired woman asked in a curious tone. The black-haired woman handed her a tablet that already had the kids' sports festival profile pulled up on it, and the green-haired woman quickly scanned over the information. Izuku Midoriya, this one shows promise, she thought as she turned her attention back to the screen. Thank you for showing me this, Osanachin. I'll be keeping my eye on this one. You don't come across talent like that very often. I had a feeling that you'd like him, Fubikasan. Once everyone finally made it across the canyon, the 1B students were quick to come up on the next obstacle. And needless to say, they were not impressed by what they saw. Aang Minefield away gawked at what was before him. You've got to be kidding me. Komori dragged her hand across her face. As it turns out, this was the most challenging obstacle yet. Not only had the 1B students managed to catch up with the rest of the pack, it seemed as though everything came to a standstill as the other students in front of them were taking their sweet time navigating the area. Although they highly doubted that any of those bombs packed any type of lethal force, it would be in their best interests to avoid setting one off. We should just get Midoriya, Takagi, and Yanagi to float us all over again, one of the students suggested. Sorry guys, but I'm gassed right now. I'm not used to carrying people with my quirk, so I need some time to recover, Takagi admitted. I'm still good to go, Midoriya told them. It's fine, you guys need to save your strength for the next round if you can help it, Kendo responded before glancing at the students working their way through the obstacle. Do anyone know what place we're in? Including Shiozaki-san and Tetsu-kun, our entire class should at least be in the top 30. Give or take a few spots, Monoma informed her. Let me see if I can sink a few of these and clear a path, Honuki announced before activating his softening and aiming it towards an open space on his right. Unfortunately for him, and the short student with purple balls on his head not too far away, the movement was enough to set off a few of the mines. Damn, no wait, Kendo blurted out. This a good thing. If Monomasan and Honuki can both soften the ground and set off the bombs, then they could just resolidify the ground and we'll be good to go. Yeah, and Bondo-kun can lay another glue trap behind us. You guys good with that? Takagi looked to the three boys. Fine with me. Yes, let's do it. Our first group of competitors have crossed the finish line, the voice of Present Mike suddenly announced. In first place is Shoto Todoroki, followed by Katsuki Bakugo. Midoriya was more than a bit surprised after hearing this. He expected Bakugo to be one of the first ones done, but that fact that the ashen blonde teen ended up getting second was no doubt going to piss him off. Whoever that Todoroki person was, he was sure to have a major annoyance coming his way in the next round. In third place from Class 1B, Ibara Shiozaki. Looks like we better get a move on, Honuki said to Monoma with a high five. The two boys used softening and erected a thin path all the way to the other side of the obstacle. As expected, this caused nearly every single mine in the vicinity to go off simultaneously. The blast was even strong enough to cause a chain reaction and set off a few more mines nearby. With their biggest problem out of the way, the two of them resolidified the ground and began making their way across. Let's go people, Kendo shouted to the rest of her classmates. The rest of the 1B students quickly followed suit and began crossing as well. Along the way they couldn't help but give a few apologetic looks at whoever was unfortunate enough to get caught up in that blast. Midoriya took note of a particular student with purple hair and odd-looking earlobes clutching the sides of her head and with a pained expression. Mop-Top Takagi shouted to Midoriya, catching his attention. Guys, up ahead. She pointed to a blonde-haired kid with a tail and another with odd-looking elbows. I'll get the one with the tail, you move the other guy out of the way. Got it. He nodded before activating his quirk and lifting the other student off of his feet, holding him in place while they all ran by him. Hey, what the hell, the black-haired kid shouted. At the same time, Takagi launched one of her hands out towards the tailed student and grabbed one of his ankles, completely taking his foot out from under him. The student hit the ground with a loud groan. Alright guys, it's a straight shot from here on out, see you at the finish line, Kendo shouted. With the green light and the finish line only a few hundred meters in front of them, the 1B students all took off in a dead sprint towards the stadium. Midoriya and Takage both took to the air, while Shishida and Tsunotori got on all fours and ran towards the end point. All the rest of the students could do was use their 2 legs to carry them across the finish line as fast as they could. The crowd cheered as nearly their entire class finished at around the same time. Even though they were all certain that they made it, everyone immediately looked up at the stadium monitor to see where they ended up placing. 10th place, Midoriya smiled to himself. 12th place, I guess Pony ended up beating me in that last sprint. Takage thought, man, what took you guys so long? Tetsu smiled as he approached his classmates. How the hell did you beat us here? That guy with the ice quirk pretty much cleared a path for everyone. Sorry, but after the race started, I just got a bit too fired up. Still, you guys should have seen Shiozaki. This course was a piece of cake for her. Whatever, at least we all made it through. I guess we kind of failed on the whole laying low idea, didn't we? Kendo smiled at everyone. For the most part, the students of 1B placed relatively well. Most of them even managed to beat a few stragglers from 1A. When the last competitor finally crossed the finish line, the horn sounded. It was still pretty fun though. Honuki chuckled. Let's give a roaring round of applause for our top 4 to 4. These will be the students who advance to the next round, Midnight announced while striking only a mildly inappropriate pose. But now, the real fun is about to begin. The chance to fully move yourselves into the limelight. Now let's see what our next event will be. The second event is usually some type of team game, right? Suburaba whispered to Monoma. That's right. A light bulb went off over Takage's head after hearing that. Depending on what event was, the right combination of quirks could determine victory. Her own quirk was versatile enough, but she knew exactly who she was going to try and partner up with. Prepare yourselves, for this. Midnight gave another dramatic wave of the hand as the next challenge popped up on screen. Oh, this is going to be a good one. The next trial for our lovely students will be a cavalry battle. Allow me to explain the rules. Midnight began with a dramatic wave of her whip. The game itself will last 15 minutes. Individual point values will be added together for your team's total. And everyone will know how much you're worth thanks to headbands. Swipe as many headbands as you can to raise your team's score. Stolen headbands must be worn from the neck up or carried in your hands. That means the more you have, the harder it will be to see, said Kendo. Also, even if your headband is stolen or your team falls down, you won't be disqualified. However, if the rider for your horse is one who hits the ground, you're done. And each team must have 4 members, no more, no less. You will also be able to use your quirks however you see fit. But there are still rules. Make a team fall on purpose and you will be disqualified. So we can't just blast our way through the other teams. And we need to watch how we use our quirks. And now for the points value. The R-rated heroine continued. To make things more exciting and make your results from the last event more important, we've added a nice little twist. You have been assigned a point value based on when you returned. The last person will be worth 5 points, and then second to last will be worth 10, and so on. Only Shadow Todoroki, who returned first, has an exemption to these rules. You see, will be worth 10 million points. Every set of eyes in the stadium turned towards the boy with the 2-tone hair. Most people probably would have felt unnerved by the target now painted on his back. But the student in question looked completely apathetic to it all. Wait, Todoroki, is he related to Endeavor? Actually, they do share somewhat of a resemblance. Midoriya thought once the boy's name registered in his mind. He did find it kind of odd how someone who could possibly be related to the Flame Hero had an ice-based quirk of all things. Maybe he's from a different side of the family. He's the guy who got the top spot on the recommendations exam, Takage said to herself. With another wave of her whip, Midnight started the countdown for the students to assemble their teams. It didn't take long for the shuffle to begin, and the students wasted no time in branching off and conversing amongst their classmates. Before he could even make a move, Midoriya felt something wrap around his shoulders. He quickly turned his head to see none other than Takage giving him a toothy smirk. So, you ready to do this, partner? I'm counting on you. You want to team up with me? He arched an eyebrow at her. Hell yeah, your quirk is perfect for this kind of thing. Of course she'd only want to partner up with me because of my quirk. Midoriya internalized before quickly shaking those thoughts out of his head. It was only logical to factor quirks into a team-up like this. Plus, it's best to team up with people that you know. And the both of us are pretty smart, so it's bonus. Now, let's go look for the rest of our team. Who did you have in mind? Takage chose not respond before grabbing the green-haired boy by the arm and leading him towards the gaggle. A couple of minutes passed before the girl spotted a head of gray hair standing by itself on the outside of the group. Yo, Yanagi, you don't have a team yet, do you? No, the girl shook her head. I was going to try and team up with Kendushin and Tetsu-kan, but the two of them decided to work with that other guy, she said while pointing towards the 2 classmates in question. Takage turned her gaze in that direction to see her 2 friends along with Shiozaki listening to some guy with wild purple hair and bags under his eyes talk. Damn, I was hoping for at least one of them to join us. The girl clicked her teeth. Well, there goes the rest of my plan. Metalhead or Itsuka would have been the perfect frontman. The group of 3 looked around for a minute in hopes of locating their final member. Most everyone was still shuffling around and the only people available seemed to be members of 1A. Takage had nothing against the students in the other hero course, but it was too risky to add on someone whose quirk and skill set was a complete unknown. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Midoriya spotted another student walk away from a group of his classmates. Their combination of quirks was already pretty good, but this one student in particular had exactly what they needed to get into the next round. "How about him?" he asked while pointing at his suggestion. The two girls followed his finger to where it was pointing, and Takage couldn't help but smile at the idea. "I like the way you think, Mop Top." Midoriya, Takage, and Yanagi quickly shifted over to the boy in question. Yosu Uwase, Class 1B's resident foul mouth. Before the headband-wearing student knew what was happening, Takage had grabbed him by the shoulders and spun him around. "Uwase, you're on our team," she told him matter-of-factly. The boy looked at the three of them for a moment before nodding his head in understanding. "Okay, fine with me. I was gonna team up with Monoma's group, but they kicked me out for Tsubiraba." "Alright, now that we have everyone, let's go over strategy." "So what's the plan?" Yanagi inquired. "We have a decent number of points in this group, but shouldn't we be figuring out how to grab the 10 million points with Midoriya here? All we need to do is get that headband and have him float us out of everyone's reach." "Actually, Uwase, if anything, we should be avoiding Todoroki-san's team." "What? Why?" "Mop Top's right, we should stay as far away from his group as we can. Everyone's gonna be hounding whoever has those points, so we should stick to the outside and stay incognito." "Okay," Uwase nodded. Midoriya and Takage were two of the smarter kids in class, so he trusted that they could come up with a good strategy. "So how are we going to do this?" Midoriya couldn't remember the last time he felt this nervous as his group waited for the horn to sound. Looking around the field and staring down his own classmates made his heart rate jump a bit. Sure, they weren't the main target, but he was certain that a couple of teams were going to be coming after them based on their quirks alone. Yet despite his nerves, Midoriya was feeling really good about the impending chaos, especially with the strategy that their group had concocted for this event. Out of nowhere, the boy felt a light squeeze on his left shoulder. "Damn dude, I can almost smell your nervousness from here." Takage smirked at him. "We'll be fine." "Man, his shoulders are solid. Are you guys sure that you want me as the rider? I mean, either one of you would make a lot more sense." Uwase asked for the fourth time. "You're actually the perfect person for the job," Yanagi answered. "Since you can weld the points to your head, everything that we manage to get will be safe. All you need to do is keep your eyes peeled, hold on to those points, and let us do the heavy lifting." Takage added on. "Okay." The weld quirk user nodded. "Beginning the second event, prepare yourself for this totally brutal battle royal present," Mike said as his voice rang through the stadium. "Start." As if on cue, almost every team in the stadium charged directly for Team Todoroki. This was to be expected though, and it gave their team the perfect chance to scout out the competition. 15 minutes was more than enough to secure a spot in the final round. For now, they were just going to play the waiting game. Just as the two Greenettes predicted, all of the attention in the stadium was strictly focused on the 10 million points. While most every other team around them made their plays at the guaranteed victory, Team Uwase waited for their opportunity to strike. Luckily for them, that opportunity came when one of 1A's teams ran right past them. Their rider appeared to have some sort of invisibility quirk, which meant that you couldn't see where their hands were moving. But seeing as the headband was facing away from them, the student wasn't paying their group any attention. "Yanagi," Takage told the girl while pointing. The poltergeist user gave a quick nod and used her quirk to discreetly lift the headband off their head. The girl wasted no time in floating the piece of cloth back over to them and letting Uwase catch it before welding it to the back of his neck. She was able to do that with such finesse. "I probably would have jerked that person's head if I tried to do it." Midoriya briefly marveled at his teammates' skill. With their first score of the day, Team Uwase decided to move around. Staying in the same spot wasn't a good idea. On top of that, the mob was slowly making their way over to them. The game went on for another few minutes and their team managed to discreetly grab another headband without the other noticing. That group was yet another team made up of members from 1A. Takage was able to reach inside the masked kid's protective shell and slip the headband off that Sue girl without her noticing. Everything was going according to plan until their team began sinking into the ground. The students looked over to see Team Monoma heading towards them. Their group consisting of Tsubiraba, Honuki, Hiruaro, and of course, Monoma. "Sorry guys, but you weren't the only ones keeping a low profile," the copy quirk user taunted. "No hard feelings, right?" "Damn it," Takage cursed before squeezing her teammate's shoulder. "Mopped up," on it, Midoriya said before activating his quirk and lifting them out of the quicksand. Although the area that Honuki could manipulate was large, it wasn't any trouble for the boy to float them to safety. "How about we call a truce?" Takage smirked back. Monoma may have been a weasel, but he was smart enough to see that they were at a disadvantage when it came to quirks. The group of boys simply stared at them for a moment before Monoma gave Honuki the signal to turn around. The blonde-haired boy had been hoping to copy Midoriya's quirk, but trying to get close to them was going to be an obstacle that would take up a lot of time. Instead, their team opted to go after the loudmouth blonde from 1A. With that minor inconvenience out of the way, Team Uwase continued avoiding the rest of the teams. They were sitting comfortably in third place, but no one was even paying them any attention. The only real hiccup came during a brief face-off with Team Koda where Bondo almost glued their feet to the ground. But besides that, they managed to stay safe. Back in the commentator's booth, Present Mike was doing his best not to spoil the fun. Geez, Shouta, your class isn't even paying attention to the 1B teams. I don't think any of them have even checked the scoreboard in a while, the voice hero commented while placing his hand over the microphone. They're too focused on the 10 million points. It may be logical to prioritize eliminating Team Bakugo and Team Todoroki altogether, but they're neglecting half of the other competitors. A heavily bandaged Aizawa groaned out. Part of me wants to rain on their parade, but I can't wait to see how they'll react if the standings stay how they are now. They'll just have to learn the consequences of not being aware of their surroundings. As the clock began winding down, Takagi couldn't help but smile at how easy all of this was. Sure, she didn't really get any chances to stand out so far, but she'll have more than enough opportunities for that in the tournament. The green-haired girl was about to start celebrating right then and there before an audible gasp from Yanagi brought her back to reality. Midoriya can get us off the ground, the gray-haired teen said earnestly. Why, no, she ordered. Midoriya didn't give it a second thought and immediately lifted their team into the air. And it's a good thing that he did, because barely a couple of seconds later nearly half of the field was assaulted by a massive wave of electricity. All Team Awase could do was watch their classmates convulse in discomfort at the unexpected attack. What was that? Awase asked while looking around. There, Yanagi pointed to Team Todoroki. I remember that blonde boy's quirk from the entrance exam. He used it to electrocute a good amount of robots in one area. The other telekinesis user in the group took a second to watch Team Todoroki continue maintaining their hold on first place. Bakugo had just made a pass at them, but the ash-blonde boy's attack was thwarted by a wall of ice. It was in that moment that Midoriya noticed the large stone rod that Todoroki used to freeze the ground with. Now he thought about it, the heterochromatic student had used similar techniques during the obstacle course. Does he need contact with the ground to freeze things, he wondered before Awase gave him a nudge on the shoulder and told him to go the opposite way. With that last obstacle avoided, Team Awase was able to hold on to third place. There was a mad dash for the 10 million points at the end, but they managed to stay out of the way of that nonsense and keep everyone else at bay. And barely a few seconds later, the sound of the horn signaled that the battle was over. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's check out the standings for the cavalry battle. As you are all aware, only the top 4 teams will advance to the next round, Midnight announced as she dramatically motioned towards the monitor. With 10,455 points is Team Todoroki in first place. Naturally, the crowd began cheering for the winners. In second place, Team Bakugo, with 1,685 points. More cheers followed the announcement of second place. Taking the third place spot is Team Awase, with 1,590 points, who more than a few of the 1A students said in unison while checking the other teams. Midoriya could almost feel the death glare that Bakugo was giving him across the field. In fourth place is Team Shinsu, with 670 points, the R-rated heroine announced. Who the hell is Shinsu, Takagi thought as she looked around. After a brief second of searching, the green-haired girl's eyes locked onto the group consisting of Tetsu, Kendo, Shiozaki, and that same purple-haired boy from earlier. What was strange was that everyone on that team aside from the tired-looking student all had confused looks on their faces. And Tetsu was rubbing his eyes really hard. And finally, we have Team Kodai. With 330 points, she motioned toward the only other team that was able to retain their headband. Apparently they played a more defensive strategy but never seized the opportunity to get some extra points. Also, Kodai shrunk down her headband and kept it wrapped around one of her fingers. Congratulations to all our competitors, but especially to our 16 finalists. We're going to take a brief 1-hour lunch for our fans and students to relax before the final round and prepare the arena. But before that, here are the matchups for the upcoming one-on-one tournament. Midnight said with yet another exaggerated motion towards the stadium monitor. On cue, the first bracket for the final tournament appeared on the screen. Midoriya vs Todoroki, Ada vs Awase, Bakugo vs Tetsu, Shiozaki vs Kaminari, Shinsu vs Ashido, Takagi vs Shiro, Yanagi vs Yaoyorozu, Kendo vs Kirishima. While Takagi and the others were high-fiving each other for making to the final round, Midoriya couldn't help but feel a slight tingle down his spine. I guess I'll be going up against the favorite in the first round, he thought as he turned his gaze towards Todoroki, only to be met with the sight of the teenager looking aloof and completely uninterested. Man, Midoriya, you're a lifesaver, dude. Awase patted the green-haired boy on the back. The waist gun is correct, Yanagi stoically added. If it wasn't for you then we wouldn't have been able to get past this round. Well, you guys did a really good job too, Midoriya nervously retorted. You know, for someone as powerful as you are, you're pretty humble. Usually people with strong-ass quirks are major wads. Yeah, we should hurry and get to the cafeteria before it gets crowded, a gray-haired teen suggested. While the three of them began their journey to get some much-needed lunch, Takagi went to go check on her friends. The remaining members of Team Shinsu were all giving each other weird and confused looks. You guys okay? The lizard tail splitter user asked with much concern in her voice. What the hell just happened? Tetsu looked around in a perplexed manner. I don't. Kendo started while shaking her head. I don't remember anything. Neither do I, Shiozaki echoed. What the other green-haired teen tilted her head in curiosity. This didn't sound good at all. That guy, the one with the purple hair, "Do you think he did something to us?" Tetsu suddenly blurted out. "I think Tetsu's right. You guys need to head over to Recovery Girl," Takage asked the trio. "I don't think so." The now annoyed Tetsu slammed a fist into his open palm. "That son of a where the hell does get off doing something like that? I don't even remember what he did to us." "Shiozaki, do you not remember anything at all?" "No." The vine-haired girl shook her head. "The last thing I remember is you three approaching me and then everything went foggy." Takage turned towards the tunnel to catch a glimpse of Shinsu casually strolling his way over to the exit. Something about this washed fishy. The fact that 3 of the strongest students in her class had no recollection of what happened certainly didn't sit right with her. "Well, whatever that guy did, you can just get back at him during the next round. Actually, you might not even get a chance since I might have to fight him before any of you." The girl smirked with thumbs up. "Eyes is so annoying. Just what the hell is that guy's quirk? Worry about it later. For now, let's just get some food in our guts and start strategizing." "Setsuna's right," Kendo interjected. "There's nothing we can do about it now. We just need to pay close attention to that Shinsu guy during the first round. Plus, I kinda want a chance to get back at him for doing whatever the heck it is that he did to us." "That's the spirit," Takage cheered while grabbing the 3 of them in her arms and making a beeline for the cafeteria. "Neither of us are going up against him in the first round, so we can scout him out. Now let's go get our grub on." On his way to the cafeteria, Midoriya made a detour over to the locker room to grab his phone. Once he retrieved the device, he wasted no time looking up the highlights from the previous 2 rounds. More specifically, the highlights of Shadow Todoroki. The heterochromatic teen was powerful, there was no denying that, and his quirk could cover a wide area in an instant. However, as he was looking over the footage from the boy's exploits during the obstacle race, he took note of one particular detail. Every time Todoroki used his quirk, it came from a body part that was in contact with the ground at the time. He mainly used his feet, but every now and then he would free something by touching it with his hand. "I guess I was right after all," Midoriya told himself. It didn't take long for the boy to make it over to the student cafeteria and grab his food. Like usual, he went with a decent-sized bowl of katsudon and a large glass of water. On any other day, he would have quickly scurried up to his normal lunchtime location. But seeing as they were in the stadium instead of the main campus, that wasn't really an option for him. Midoriya began searching for a nice, quiet place to eat his food and go over his strategy. But a familiar voice caught his attention. "Hey Midoriya-kun, we saved you a seat," Honuki called out to him. The boy looked over to where the lipless teen was sitting only to see that his class had pretty much taken over an entire section for themselves. Although he would have preferred eating alone, the stunning lack of open seats heavily influenced his ability to make a decision. "Thank you, Honuki-san," he said as he took the open spot across from the boy. This particular seat was at the end of the table. To his right was Yanagi and across from him on Honuki's left was Tsunotori. "Are you ready for the next round? You're the first one up, right?" "Yeah," Midoriya nervously answered. "Sorry, you guys got eliminated in the last round." "Hey, it I what it is." Honuki shrugged. "Honestly, that guy from 1A with the explosion quirk just got the better of us. I thought sinking his teammates' feet would have been enough to slow him down. But I guess it wasn't." "Yeah, blast man very fast with powers," a slightly dejected Tsunotori added on. As it turns out, Team Bakugo was the reason both of their groups didn't advance to the tournament stage. Apparently Monoma decided that it would be a good idea to antagonize the boy about some incident that occurred a while ago. And Tsunotori's team had their headband stolen from them in the final seconds. "Well, you guys still did great out there," Midoriya told them in an attempt to brighten up their moods. "Hey, better luck next year, right? At least we got a chance to show off to the pros a bit. So I'm not too worried about internship offers. Plus, I get to relax for the rest of the day and enjoy the show. And I'm definitely looking forward to how you handle Todoroki-san." Honuki joked. "That guy got first place in both events. He's probably the overall favorite to win the entire thing." Awase added on from his spot next to Yanagi. "If anything, Midoriya's got to face the toughest opponent right out the gate. I overheard some of the 1A guys say that he's the strongest one on their class while we were in line." Ibara spoke up. "Midoriya-san will do nice, because he can jump through air. That other guy only freezes things." Tsunotori was next to voice her opinion in broken Japanese. "He still shouldn't take the guy lightly though. I remember him during the recommendations exam. He's powerful as hell and he's quick with his ice. Oh yeah, I forgot you got into UA. On recommendations." Awase waved his chopsticks at the lipless teen. "Yeah, barely," Honuki shot back. "What do you mean?" Midoriya asked. "The only reason I got in was because someone else pulled their application a couple of days after the exam was over. If it wasn't for that, I would have had to take the regular entrance exam like everyone else. Why the hell would someone pull their application from UA?" Ibara wondered. All Honuki could do was give him a confused shrug. Who knows, either way, Midoriya-kun's gonna have his work cut out for him. He'll be fine. The horn teen gave Midoriya a thumbs up. It was certainly an odd feeling for the boy to be given a vote of confidence by anyone, let alone another classmate. Although he did appreciate the kind words, his mind was more focused on the task at hand. If everything they were saying about this Todoroki guy was true, then he was going to have to be careful. The conversation went on pretty normally for the next 15 minutes before the stadium's intercom sounded. Will Izuku Midoriya and Shadow Todoroki please report to the designated waiting area? With that, the green-haired boy stood up and began making his way over to the exit. Alright Izuku, it's showtime. You could feel the anticipation in the air as the crowd waited for the all-important one-and-on tournament to begin. After all, this was the one event that everyone was waiting to see. Following the announcement of the first bracket, it was hard to miss the spectators, pro heroes included, placing their bets to see who would come out on top. From what the 1B students could gather, Bakugo and Todoroki were the favorites to win it all. However, Shiozaki, Midoriya, Takagi, and Tetsu seemed to be amongst the list of notable contenders as well. As the students of Class 1B took their seats in their assigned section, Takagi, Tetsu, Shiozaki, and Kendo all decided to sit together to cheer on their classmate. The only person in their class not present at the moment besides Midoriya was away since his match was up next. Everyone was curious as to how this first fight was going to play out. Based on everything that they had heard, Todoroki was probably the strongest amongst the first years, and having the ability to freeze anything with a mere touch was certainly one to be feared. This guy's supposed to be Endeavor's son, right? Subiraba asked no one in particular. Yeah, it's weird how he has the exact opposite quirk. He doesn't, Monoma interjected, earning a few curious looks. The copy quirk user then passed the boy his phone to show him the profile for the heterochromatic teen. He has a dual quirk. He can use both flames and ice. Seriously, I wonder why he hasn't shown off that part of his quirk yet. It would have been quite effective to use during the cavalry battle, Shishida stated while adjusting his glasses. I don't think it really matters though. Honuki was next to speak. Why not? Because Mop Top's gonna win. Takagi was the one to answer. What makes you so sure? It doesn't matter if Todoroki can use ice or fire. He's at a disadvantage when it comes to quirks. This fight will be over pretty quickly. You seem pretty confident in Midoriya-kun's skill. Yanagi gave a curious look. Of course I am. Over in the 1A section, the rest of their classmates were having a completely different conversation. So does anyone know the deal with this Midoriya guy? Ajiro asked around. Beats me. Kaminari shrugged. He's kind of plain looking, isn't he? I wasn't even paying attention to him during the last round. Now that I think about it, I don't remember seeing any of the 1B guys except for that annoying blonde kid and the furry guys team, said Ishido as she racked her brain to see if she could remember the greenette. Do you think he even stands a chance? Against Todoroki? Probably not. Zero sneered. At the other end of the booth, Uraraka decided to keep quiet. She was pretty sure that her and Ada were the only ones in their class that had ever seen the boy use his quirk. Part of her wanted to blow the whistle and inform her classmates of his powers. But seeing as she still owed the guy for saving her butt back at the entrance exam and her verbal folly a few weeks ago, she decided to keep her mouth shut. What do you think? Hachikachi Nasui asked the brunette. I think that this round's gonna be real interesting. The girl simply said, it doesn't matter what you losers think. Deku's gonna lose. Bakugo angrily voiced his opinion. Alright ladies and gentlemen, the time is now. The moment that you've all been waiting for our one-and-on battle tournament. The crowd erupted into cheers and howls once present. Mike's voice came through the stadium speakers. Now, our first competitor from the Hero Courses Class 1A. His may run hot but he's as cool as ice. He also got admitted through recommendations. Please give it up for Shadow Todoroki. More cheers followed as everyone focused in on the son of the number 2 hero. Next up, from the Hero Courses Class 1B. He tied for the top spot on the written exam and got 3rd place on Hero Course Practical Exam. Izuku Midoriya. Oh wow, I didn't know Midoriya scored 3rd on the entrance exam, Shota stated. As he made his approach to his end of the ring, Midoriya took a moment to look at his opponent. The heterochromatic teen was giving off an aura of cold intimidation that sent a metaphorical chill down his spine. He had almost no real information on this guy, and the fact that he got into UA on recommendations means that he was powerful if not very skilled. I'm pretty certain about him needing to have contact with the ground to use his quirk. I should probably try and just float him out of the ring as soon as Midnight Sensei starts the match, he told himself while thinking over his strategy. But just to be safe, I'm going to take to the air so he doesn't freeze my feet. Alright boys, I want a good clean match. No hits below the belt and no excessive use of force. Do you both understand? The 2 boys gave a quick nod to the deviously dressed referee. Let the first match begin, Midnight shouted with a wave of her whip. The second the words left her lips, Todoroki sent out an absolutely massive wave of ice towards his opponent. If the heterochromatic teen's goal was to show off his power, then he definitely succeeded. Nearly a third of stadium was frozen over once the initial shock settled and the temperature had dropped significantly over the entire area. What? Kamakiri gawked at the glacier in total disbelief. This is insane. Did this guy just make an iceberg? Subiraba needed confirmation just to make sure that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Where's Midoriya-kun? Yanagi whispered in a worried tone. The 1B students began searching the ice with their eyes, but none of them could see their green-haired classmate. They were all absolutely certain that he was somewhere in that attack. Up there, Takagi suddenly pointed towards the middle of the arena. Class 3A. Utamaki-kun, look, that one can fly, a bubbly brunette blurted out in a jovial fashion. I'd be terrified of being up that high. A boy with pointed ears mumbled into his desk. And he's adorable too. I bet Ryukyu would love him. I'm gonna send her a text. You think that's a good idea too, right? He'd match our group's theme perfectly. Back in the ring, Todoroki took a second to look at the ice wall that he created. He definitely overused his quirk with that attack, but he needed to send a message. And he would no doubt have an ample amount of time to recover until his next match. This match is odd. The boy was cut off when he suddenly felt his feet leave the ground. For a split second, Todoroki lost his composure at this unfamiliar sensation and began looking around. Something wasn't right. That attack should have completely immobilized his opponent. Before another thought could cross his mind, he heard someone in the crowd yell and point towards the sky. The boy upturned his gaze to see his opponent floating in midair, well above the wall of ice that he had just made with his hand extended out towards him. He can fly. I just lucked out big time. Midoriya breathed a sigh of relief. If I hadn't decided to immediately get off the ground, I would have been frozen. The green-haired teen took a second to look over his opponent, who he was levitating towards the boundary line. Based on the fact that Todoroki hadn't tried to launch an attack at him while he was in the air, Midoriya surmised that his earlier assumptions about the boy's quirk were correct. With no intention of delaying things any further, the verdant teen used his telekinesis to float the boy over the boundary line and set him down on the grass outside of the ring. As Shadow Todoroki, eyes out of B-bounds, a half-frozen Midnight announced as Cementos rushed to her aid. A brief silence fell over the crowd before a massive roar erupted in the stadium. Somewhere in the hero section, a certain flame hero had accidentally melted part of the wall behind him. Wait, what? Minda shouted what everyone else in 1A seemed to be thinking. This guy just beat Todoroki. No way. Hagakure whispered out in a bewildered tone. What the heck is his quirk? It appears as though this Izuku Midoriya is not one to be taken lightly. Takoyami simply stated. Yeah, I pretty much expected that to happen. Uraraka laughed only loud enough for Asui to hear her. While the other 1A students were still shaking their heads in disbelief at how easy of a victory that appeared to be, one student was unusually quiet. A whirlwind of emotions were going through Bakugo's head at the moment, and none of them were pleasant. He didn't know whether or not he wanted to strangle someone or punch them in the face. He doesn't know when or how that shitty loser got a quirk. But he was going to find out. Because anyone who tries to make a fool of Katsuki Bakugo was going to pay the price. I don't get it. Kaminari started. If this guy can fly, why didn't he do that during the obstacle race? He probably would have came in first place. That Monoma guy did say that most of the 1B students intentionally held back. Maybe he was one of them. Yes, that does appear to be the case. Yaoyorozu agreed. Hell yeah, mopped up. I told you guys he was gonna win. Takage nearly jumped up out of her seat as she cheered loud enough for the 1A students to hear her. Looks like Takage-san was right. That was a close one, wasn't it? Honuki let out a sigh of relief. I'll say, it looks like Midoriya-kun just set the bar pretty high. I hope you guys are ready. The waist gun is up next. Let's hope our class can go 2 for 2. Blizzard Hero Agency, Saitama Prefecture. Man, I bet Endeavor ain't too happy about that. The black-haired woman known as Ozhana began laughing so hard that she had to clutch her sides. The green-haired woman known as Fubuki decided not to say anything before standing up and walking towards her office. Where are you going, boss? To file my internship request. I've seen more than enough. Sweet. A few minutes later, Midoriya returned to his classmates while everyone waited for the next match to begin. There was a bit of a delay considering they had to bring in a crew of people with fire quirks to break down the ice. But this just gave everyone more than enough time to congratulate their new ace. Midoriya-kun, sent everyone practically shouted at the boy, his face immediately heating up at all of this unwanted attention. Dude, you just beat the son of the number 2 hero. You're probably about to get a ton of internship offers off of that alone. Tetsu told him. Yo, mopped up, I saved you a seat. Takage pointed to the open spot next to her. Midoriya did plan on sitting by himself over in the back corner, but it would have been rude to just outright deny the girl's offer, and he didn't want to come off that way to his classmates. Overall, he didn't really know what the others thought of him, but it wasn't really a good idea to lessen their opinion. Ooh, thank you, Takage-san. You did well, Midoriya-kun. Yanagi whispered. To be honest, you probably just became one of the favorites to win the tournament, Midoriya-kun. Kendo gave him a quick smile. You think so? The boy said with a slight chuckle while rubbing the back of his head. It still felt weird for him to receive any type of praise. He just wasn't used to the feeling. A part of him wanted to be happy about it, but deep down he knew that the other students wouldn't have been half as nice to him if he didn't have his quirk. A waist gun is up next. Let's hope that he can beat that 1A loser, Monoma said smugly. The next match featured a waist versus the vice representative from Class 1A, Tenya Ida. To say that things were over rather quickly would be an accurate assessment. As it turns out, the indigo-haired teen had some type of speed quirk. The headband-wearing student didn't even have a chance to blink or use his quirk to weld his feet to the ground before being forced out of the ring. Hiatus's quirk is definitely powerful. It bears a resemblance to the pro hero Ingenium's. The two of them are probably related. I'm going up against him in the next round. I don't know how long he can use that speed boost of his, but I should try and avoid his reach. For Iwase-san, he stood no chance. Tsunotori said, Welp, I better head down to the waiting area. Tetsu stood up and began stretching out his shoulders. After Shiozaki and Kaminari was his match against Bakugo. The silver-haired teen was more than a bit excited to show his stuff. Knock him dead. Takage shot him with thumbs up. Hey Midoriya, you know this guy, right? You got any advice on how to beat him? The green-haired teen hesitated for a moment while he thought of an answer. Tetsu's quirk was ideal for this kind of thing, but Bakugo was never one to be taken lightly. He's a lot smarter than he lets on, so don't underestimate him. His battle instincts are also very good, he said before giving one last piece of advice. Also, more than likely he'll start the fight off with a big right, so look out for that. Thanks man. The steel quirk user shot him a thumbs up before taking his leave. You sure do know a lot about this guy. Takage arched an eyebrow at him. The two of you fight before or something? Something like that, Midoriya simply said, his face slightly shifting into a darkened expression. Okay, these two definitely have history. Shiozaki versus Kaminari proved to be another quick victory. The electric quirk user tried to fire off what looked to be a maximum voltage attack only to be quickly subdued by Shiozaki's vines. This match was the second fastest so far, being over in less than 15 seconds. Kaminari simply drew the short straw for this match. Shiozaki-san's quirk is the perfect counter for his electricity, and she has the skill to use it both offensively and defensively. If I remember correctly, she came in fourth on the entrance exam with a very good score. Tetsu versus Bakugo ended up being the longest match of the tournament so far. To put it simply, it was a battle of endurance. The 1B student took his classmate's advice and was ready for a big right swing from Bakugo. He was able to block it in time and tried to follow up with a big punch of his own, but the ash-blonde teen was somehow able to dodge it. What followed was essentially Tetsu taking wave after wave of explosions until his body finally overheated and gave out. But he did manage to land a clean gut punch on the boy that made him stumble. The entire display lasted about 10 minutes before the silver-haired teen hit the ground from exhaustion. Tetsu honestly lasted longer than I expected, and Bakugo's ferociousness is just as bad. I remember. If we both win our next fights, then I'll have to go up against him in the semifinals. This Deidara wanna be sure is tough, isn't he? Ibara said. He fights like a wild animal, Shishida added. The following match was the one that Takage was the most curious about. This Hitoshi Shinsu guy from the General Studies was the one that was on a team with Tetsu and Kendo. She was interested in what type of quirk the guy had, but her friends couldn't really give her a straight answer. In the waiting room, she watched the television screen with rapt attention. The purple-haired boy was going up against the pink girl from 1A. She didn't know what her quirk was, but judging by the confident smirk on her face, it had to be something good. Merely a few seconds after Midnight lowered her whip, Takage was stunned by what she saw. Instead of battling, Ishido simply turned around and walked out of the ring, making Shinsu the winner without so much as lifting a finger. To say that the green-haired girl was confused would be an understatement, but she now had a better understanding of what she was up against. Unfortunately, the girl didn't really have much time to think about it before the loudspeaker told her to report to the ring. Alright Setsuna, time to go out there and show him what you got. Alright ladies and germs, let's move on to the next match. President Mike shouted into the microphone. First up is the vice rep from the Hero Courses Class 1B. Yet another student who was admitted through recommendations, Setsuna Takage. Don't lose, damn it, Tetsu hollered from the 1B booth. And her opponent from the Hero Courses Class 1A. He may be plain looking, but his powers are marvelous. Give it up for Hiatus Zero. The moment Midnight began the match, Takage was briefly thrown off guard when Zero unleashed what appeared to be a line of tape from his elbow and wrapped it around her body. The black-haired student from 1A proceeded to use this opportunity to try and fling the girl out of bounds. However, Takage had other plans. The lizard tail splitter user detached her top half from her bottom half before her feet could reach the boundary line. Needless to say, Zero was so thrown off by seeing this that he loosened his grip on the rest of her body. With that momentary lapse in judgment, Takage broke up her top half and sent her arms flying towards him. The resulting uppercut was enough to put the black-haired teen out of commission. Hiatus Zero is unable to continue. Setsuna Takage is the winner, Midnight shouted with a bit more enthusiasm than she did for the first few matches. Man, that was a close one, the girl thought to herself while walking down the steps and giving a polite wave to the crowd. If I had been anyone else, I might have lost. The following match pitted Yanagi against the representative of Class 1A, Momo Yaoyorozu. Takage remembered the girl from the recommendations exam, and she had possibly one of the most broken quirks that she's ever heard of. But she was confident in her classmates' skills. When the match began, Yaoyorozu immediately created some sort of bow staff and iron shield and charged directly at Yanagi. Yet the moment she was in range of her quirk, the gray-haired teen used her poltergeist to rip both objects from her grasp. Yaoyorozu hesitated for a moment and reacted by forming another bow staff, only to get a similar result. With 3 objects now under control, Yanagi turned the weapons on their creator and used them to strike the girl in 3 separate places at the same time. The force of the impacts were more than enough to knock out the raven-haired teen, and Yanagi was declared the winner in less than a minute. Yaoyorozu-san's quirk is nothing short of amazing, but Yanagi-san is just too skilled. She has a level of finesse and control that I don't really think that I can match right now. If her weight limit and range weren't so restricted, I don't think I'd be able to stand a chance. The final match of the first round was between Kendo and Eijiro Kirishima from 1A. It was probably one of the more anticlimactic fights of the day, seeing as Kirishima decided to take the direct approach and tried to get into a slugfest with class rep of 1B. Once it was clear that the red-haired teen had no long-range capabilities, Kendo enlarged her hand, grabbed the boy tight enough to where he couldn't move and tossed him out of the ring. Hey, this guy's quirk is the same as yours, metalhead. Takage grinned at her friend. TCH, mine's better. Tetsu jokingly replied. Kendousen's dangerous at close range. I remember her saying that she was a martial artist. It's best to just keep her at a distance. And Kirishimasen's approach was just too straightforward. He didn't really stand a chance. Damn, these 1B guys are no joke. All of them seem pretty powerful and their quirks are hard to work around. Ajiro voiced his opinion. That general studies kid is a problem too, Jiro. I still don't even remember what happened during our match. Ashido groaned in shame. Bakugousen and Iidasen have their work cut out for them. Especially Iidasen since he'll have to go against that Midoriya guy. Rin added, I'm pretty sure that's the guy who tripped me up during the end of the obstacle course. Zero scowled. I guess we shouldn't have been sleeping on the other class so bad. Inside the faculty viewing area, the teachers were giving their own assessments of the first round. Well, Kenkun, it seems like your class decided to show up after all. 13 told the white-haired man. I'll say, Snipe chuckled while twirling his empty pistol. I bet Aizawa's gotta be pissed that most of his students got eliminated so easily. I wouldn't be surprised if he expelled one of them after the tournament was over just to save face. Hound Dog was next to speak up. According to social media, Midoriya is now one of the favorites along with Bakugo. Isn't that the kid that you and Aizawa fought over after the entrance exams? Yeah, Ken nodded proudly. My students are amazing, I have the best class ever. What's his deal? He doesn't strike me as the flashy type, but his quirk is top-notch. He kind of reminds me of Tornado with how he uses his powers to fly around like that. Are they related? According to him, they're not. Like most of my class, Midoriya is the quiet type. I think he tries to avoid attention more than anyone else. But his grades are excellent and he definitely seems like more of a thinker than a fighter. While that conversation was going on, Toshinori Yagi was looking over the profile for the boy in question. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about this green-haired wonder seemed familiar. The blonde-haired man had a feeling that he had met him somewhere before. The boy performed very well in all of their heroics classes up until now and he seemed very bright. Like Ken said, he seemed to shy away from attention based on what he had seen and didn't talk a lot. But he was a good student nonetheless. However, Yagi could pinpoint a few times during class where he caught Midoriya shooting him an uncomfortable glare. Something that didn't sit right with him. Is something the matter? Toshinori-kun Nezu asked the emaciated blonde. No sir, just marveling at the fine crop of students this year. It appears as though a lot of them have been holding out on me during class. Indeed, the bipedal mammal nodded. Who knows, one of them might even be able to give your favorite student a run for his money. Maybe sir. Yagi simply smiled and laughed at his boss' remark. With the second round of the tournament about to begin, Midoriya was making his way over the ring. Things had been going smoothly so far, but the very real probability that he was going to have to go up against Bakugo was still lingering in his mind. In truth, the thought of throwing the next match just to avoid this confrontation did cross his mind. But his heart wasn't about to let him do that. Midoriya had spent years running away from the guy, and he wasn't about to let the lingering fear that he still had for him cloud his judgment. Right as Midoriya made his way around the corner and onto the next hall, he was caught by surprise when he found himself standing face to face with none other than Enji Todoroki, more commonly known as the Flame Hero Endeavor. He quickly realized that pictures never really did the man justice and that he was much more intimidating in person. And the constant stream of flames emanating from his body only added to his look. There you are, boy, the Flame Hero said as he pointed a finger at the face of Midoriya, an action that immediately rubbed the verdant teen the wrong way. I was hoping to get the chance to speak with you. Midoriya tilted his head after this. What did Endeavor of all people want to speak with him for? Yes, you managed to best my son in the first round. You could practically hear the annoyance in the man's voice as the words left his mouth. That child is going through a bit of a rebellious stage at the moment, but that shouldn't take away from your victory. I've been watching some of the highlights from the previous events and I have to say that you've impressed me. Thank you, sir. Midoriya slightly stuttered out. Getting praise from the number 2 hero of all people certainly wasn't what he was expecting. You're still not as powerful as my shadow, but you have potential. In fact, you remind me a bit of that annoying brat, Tornado. He continued. This was enough for Midoriya to look the man in the eye. However, when he did, he couldn't help but notice something. He had seen that look too many times before. It was the look of pure and utter arrogance. It wasn't a secret that Endeavor wasn't the nicest guy around, but the borderline conceited snarl on his face definitely didn't sit well with him. It was painfully obvious to Midoriya that the man was exactly the kind of person that he didn't like. I'll be putting in an offer for you to internship at my agency in the coming weeks. You do well to accept it. Midoriya decided to do the smart thing and hold his tongue while giving the man a polite bow. Thank you for your consideration, sir. Indeed. Endeavor simply nodded as he turned around. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go find my son. With that, the Flame Hero made his exit, leaving Midoriya with a weird feeling in his gut. I guess Endeavor really is just another one of them after all. Alright listeners, it's time for the first match of the second round. President Mike yelled into the microphone. First up, with a hero pedigree that would put most others to shame, He's a speed demon ready to sprint his way to victory. The vice representative for the hero courses Class 1A. Make some noise for Tenya Ida. I remember briefly crossing paths with Midoriya-san during the entrance exam. I'll have to use my top speed if I'm going to avoid his telekinesis. Tensei is watching, so I need to make sure I put on a good show for him. The engine quirk user thought as he entered the ring. And his opponent. He's been laying low up until now, but with his upset victory in the first round he's sure to be on everyone's radar. Class 1B's resident flyboy, Izuku Midoriya. Did he seriously just call him Flyboy? Oh man, that's great. Takage couldn't help but giggle at her classmate's new moniker. Hiatus' speed is top notch. I'll have to take to the air again if I want to win this. He's just too fast, Midoriya told himself. Let the match begin, the R-rated heroine shouted with a wave of her whip. Having already decided that a prolonged fight would not be to his advantage, Ida immediately activated his quirk at maximum power and sprinted towards Midoriya, while at the same time, the telekinesis user lifted himself off the ground. What the green-haired boy wasn't expecting, however, was for Ida to immediately jump into the air and ready his right leg to deliver a devastating kick. Somehow, Midoriya was able to recognize this in time and ascended further into the sky just out of his reach, narrowly avoiding what was sure to be a concussion if that attack managed to make contact. That was my only chance. Ida clenched his jaw after dropping back onto the ground. What happened next was pretty much what everyone expected. Midoriya simply used his powers to levitate Ida into the air and out of the ring, securing himself a spot in the semifinals. Tenya Ida is out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya is the winner, Midnight declared to a roaring crowd. That was a fine showing, Midoriya-san. Your battle prowess and quirk are truly formidable, the vice rep of 1A said with a low bow, a gesture that Midoriya was quick to return. You did well yourself, Hiatus. I apologize for ending things so quickly. Please, don't worry yourself over it. Oh my, such youthful vigor. Midnight cooed at the gentlemanly exchange between the two boys. Back in the 1A booth, the Hero Course students were giving their thoughts on the match. This guy took out Idaken too, huh? I'd hate to say it, but the only person that stands a chance of beating him is probably Bakugo. At the other end of the section, Yaoyorozu noticed the short smile on Uraraka's face. The brunette was good friends with their vice rep from what she had seen, so it was odd seeing her react in such a way. Is something troubling you, Uraraka-chan? Oh, and no. The brunette waved off. I just thought that Idaken would stand more of a chance against Midoriya-san. Yes, this boy from 1B seems to be quite the fighter, and his quirk gives him a major advantage over everyone else. The raven-haired teen agreed. That's right, a voice suddenly interjected. The entirety of their class turned their attention towards the dividing wall where Nito Monoma was giving them what was possibly the most smug grin they had ever seen. Midoriya-kun is truly one to be feared. You 1A jerks should have paid more attention to your competition. Just you wait until the rest of our class mops the floor with you. Hey, you're that blonde-haired guy from earlier. Ishido pointed an accusatory finger at him. Well, if it isn't the girl who gave you act, Monoma was cut off by Kendo chopping him in the back of the neck, knocking the blonde boy out instantly. As she took the time to pick up Monoma's limp body from over the divider wall, she was met with the curious looks of the students of Class 1A. It was the first time that the orange-haired girl had interacted with their class, minus Ida and Yaoyorozu. And she was not about to let Monoma of all people ruin their image. Sorry about him, guys. He's kind of crazy. The big fist user apologized to the other students. Oh, Kendo-san. Hello. Yaoyorozu greeted the girl. Hey, please tell me that everyone in your class isn't like that. Oh, definitely not. Takage interjected as she took up a spot next to Kendo. I know our classes are supposed to be rivals and all that, but Monoma is a bit of a special case. To be honest, I think he might have rabies. Takage-san, it's nice seeing again. You know her, the girl with purple hair and peculiar earlobes asked. We took the recommendations exam together, Yaoyorozu explained. Neat, Jiro. There were some interesting-looking characters in 1A based on first impressions. There was the masked guy with 6 arms and another student that looked as though his head was made of rocks. Then again, with guys like Bondo and Fukudashi walking around, people probably thought the same thing about her class. We'll be sure to keep Monoma here on a tight leash, so don't worry about him. He thinks you guys are all arrogant assholes. That's ironic. So, what's the deal with this Midoriya guy? Kirishima asked, curious about the green-haired boy. He took out 2 of the strongest guys in our class and Bakugo seems to have a bone to pick with him. If anything, your classmate seems to be the one with the issue. Takage retorted. I don't understand. A floating set of clothes said. I'm guessing they have history or something. He pretty much attacked him in the hallway a couple of weeks ago. Is that what all the yelling was about? I thought Bakugo was just having another temper tantrum. Well, the 2 of them will probably be going against each other in the semifinals. Hopefully things don't get too out of hand. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Mop Top is pretty level-headed. I mean, you have to be to take out the son of Endeavor and Ingenium's brother, right? Takage joked. Speaking of which, has anyone heard from Todoroki? He hasn't been back ever since his match. Kaminari looked around. He's probably just licking his wounds. Or brooding, whichever one. Ajiro shrugged. Well, I hope he's doing well. He shouldn't let one loss get to him, Kendo stated before backing away from the wall. We'll talk to you guys later. Indeed. The raven-haired teen nodded. The second match pitted Shiozaki against Bakugo. Unfortunately for the vine-haired girl, the tables were turned on her from her last match. With the obvious mismatch when it came to quirks, it was practically child's play for the boy to blow away nearly all of her vines. The match was over in less than a minute and Bakugo had secured himself a spot in the semifinals. Shiozaki is good, but she just drew the short straw, Midoriya thought to himself while letting out a sigh. Apparently the universe wasn't as kind to him as he had hoped. "Are you okay?" Midoriya Yanagi asked in her usually stoic tone. "Yes, I'm great," he reassured her. "Setsuna's up next. I hope she can beat this Shinsu guy," Kendo stated in a worried tone. "I wasn't able to give any advice on how this guy's quirk works." "Shinsu has power to take over brains, correct?" Tsunotori wondered. "It appears so," said Monoma, who only recently regained consciousness. "His last match was over so quickly that I didn't even get a chance to see what he did. Setsuna will be fine. I'm sure she's already picked out a way to handle this douchebag." "Alright party people, it's time for the third match of the quarterfinals. Yet another student who's made a splash onto the scene. This mystery man has everyone on their toes. From the General Studies Department's Class 1 degree Celsius, please make some noise for Hitoshi Shinsu." The crowd began cheering for the tournament underdog, but the 1 degree Celsius section made no attempt to hide their support. "And his opponent, frankly her quirk gives me the heebie-jeebies." The vice representative for Class 1B, Setsuna Takagi. The green-haired girl was too focused to let her teacher's less than stellar introduction get to her. Although she wasn't sure about what this purple-haired insomnia case could do, she knew that he had some sort of mind control power. The problem was that she didn't know what conditions had to be met for him to activate it. Based on his last round, it obviously worked at a distance. So she needed to be careful. "You know, I'm jealous of someone like you. You have all this power and you got fast-tracked into the hero course. Did you even have to work for your spot?" the boy taunted her in a smug tone. "Save the banter for after you lose the match," she shot back almost instantly, more out of reaction than anything else. "Why would I do that when I've already won?" Shinsu gave her a smug grin. "Let the next match begin," Midnight announced with a dramatic wave. Immediately, Takagi split herself up and sent her head flying towards the sky. She was pretty much gambling on keeping herself out of his range. But it was the best she could do in this situation. Deciding to play it safe, she sent an arm towards him but the boy was able to move out the way. Just barely. The girl was about to send another arm at him but noticed how his face twisted into an almost manic grin. "What are you smy?" The moment the words came out of her mouth, Takagi felt her entire body lock up. Her muscles tensed and it felt as if someone put her entire brain in a pot of freezing water. The only thing she could get her mind to focus on was her opponent's voice. "What the hell just happened? I can't move any of my pieces." "I guess that recommendation was all for show. I'm not surprised though, the rest of your buddies went out just as easily." The boy taunted again. "Now, do me a favor and put one of your feet past the boundary line." Against her will, Takagi followed the boy's command. Her set her leg down outside of the ring. There was a silence amongst the crowd as everyone waited for the verdict from Midnight, who herself had to think about it for a second. Setsuna Takagi is out of bounds. Hitoshi Shinsu advances. The moment the words came out of her mouth, Takagi felt herself regain control of her body and immediately pieced herself back together. Once she was done, she shot a glare back at her opponent. "What did you just do?" "It's a trade secret," he said with yet another smug grin before walking off, leaving the girl completely confused about what just transpired. Something wasn't right. 1 second she was in complete control, the next she wasn't. However this guy's quirk worked, it was powerful. Deciding that she wouldn't linger on it any further, Takagi picked up what was left of her pride and made her way back to her classmates. Still completely confused on this whole ordeal. Within a few minutes, the girl was back in the 1B booth and was met with Tetsu throwing an arm over her shoulder. "Damn, I thought for sure that you were going to beat that asshole. That guy's quirk is insane. I don't even know how he got me." "It was the same for us." Shiozaki pointed to herself and Tetsu. "Shinsu's mind control isn't easy to figure out." "You got that right." While his classmates were discussing the previous match, Midoriya's mind was running a mile a minute. Shinsu's mind control ability was definitely top-notch. The further he thought about the boy's last 2 matches, the more confused he got. There had to be some kind of trigger that needed to be met for him to use it. It couldn't have been an area of effect-type quirk, otherwise he would have just taken control of the entire field during the cavalry battle. Maybe he could only control one person at a time. No, that wasn't it. He had his entire team under his control in the last event. The verdant teen was brought out of his mental rambling when Takagi sat down in the seat next to him. "Man," the girl said with a slight grin, "I couldn't even make it past the second round. I guess I won't be seeing you in the finals then, huh? You still did great out there, Takagi-san," he told her sincerely. "You're so sweet. Do you mind being my shoulder to cry on, or I could lay my head on your lap." 3. He stuttered out as his face quickly adopted a shade of red. "All right, now I feel better," she said with a not so subtle laugh. "Getting a reaction out of you is just what the doctor ordered." "Oh, tell you what, if you really want to make me feel better." A devious smirk quickly formed on her face. "You can take me out on a date so I can lick my wounds later today. You can fly me somewhere nice. Wow, you don't waste any time." Honuki started laughing, only to be joined by a few others immediately after. "That's enough," Monoma half-shouted. We need to start putting our heads together and come up with a strategy for Kendousen to beat this Shinsu character. He's making our class look bad. Aren't you forgetting about Yanagi Kamakiri? Asked the copy quirk user. Kendousen weighs too much for her to control. I don't want to sound impolite, but Yanagi-san doesn't really stand a chance. Slap. One of Shiozaki's vines hit the boy in the face. Don't be rude, the girl scolded him. I'll be sure to tell Kendo that you called her fat. Awase laughed at the display. As it turns out, Monoma had the ability to see the future. The match between Yanagi and Kendo was short. Due to the fact that Kendo outweighed the girl by a few kilograms, the gray-haired teen was all but helpless in their fight. Luckily for her, the orange-haired class rep was merciful and simply picked her up and set her outside of the ring instead of going all out. Alright, let's get this over with. Midoriya sighed to himself as he stood up and walked towards the exit. Give him hell. Mop-Top Takage gave him one last word of encouragement. Thanks. As he made his way up the steps, Midoriya was admittedly having a difficult time keeping his nerves in check. Across the ring, Bakugo was giving him a death glare that promised him nothing but pure agony. In his mind, he could only assume that the explosion quirk user was furious that he had the audacity to even breathe the same air as him. And the fact that he now had an unexplained quirk was just another tally mark on his record. The green-haired boy's mind was in two places right now. On one hand, part of him still retained a slight bit of fear towards the guy who made his childhood a living hell. On the other, he knew he had no reason to be afraid of the guy. Sure, Bakugo's quirk was as amazing as it had always been, but now he was more than capable of going toe-to-toe with him. Midoriya resolved himself to just end things quickly and use his telekinesis on him as soon as he was given the signal. There's nowhere for you to run, Deku the ashen blonde teen barked at him. Once I'm done beating you to a pulp, you're going to tell me how you got that shitty quirk of yours. No one makes a fool out of me and gets away with it. Of course he thinks this is all about him. In the student section you could practically feel the tension radiating off the two competitors. Takage found herself a bit worried about her classmate, but quickly set that aside. Midoriya was guaranteed an easy win. This was literally going to be as simple as levitating Bakugo out of the ring. Midoriya-san's gonna win, right? Tsunotori asked in a slightly nervous tone. She had faith in the guy, but he was going up against someone who could blow things up with a flick of the wrist. He'll be fine. Honuki reassured her horned classmate. Our first match of the semifinals is going to feature two of the top dogs of the hero course. Both of these boys are heavy favorites to win it all, but only one of them can make it to the next round. Now for our first competitor. A lean, mean, green machine from Class 1B. He's been soaring his way into our hearts, Izuku Midoriya. Though Midoriya, avenge me damn it, Tetsu shouted after the introduction. And his opponent, sporting a face that only a mother could love. His mouth is almost as explosive as his fists. Give it up for Katsuki Bakugo. Come on Bakugo, make our class proud, Kirishima cheered loudly from the 1A booth. With his plan already in place, Midoriya activated his telekinesis and got ready to fling his opponent out of the ring. That's all that he had to do. No more, no less. Let the match begin, Midnight shouted with a wave of her hand. The moment the words left the R-rated heroine's mouth, Bakugo did something unexpected. Instead of flying straight towards Midoriya, the ashen blonde aimed his hands towards the ground and blasted everything directly in front of his feet. This created a plume of smoke that completely clouded Midoriya's vision. A smokescreen, I can't see him, the green-haired boy thought. Barely a second later, a powerful blast went off and a wall of fire made a beeline straight for him. Midoriya didn't have enough time to think and only reacted by rolling to his right. However, the teen was met with a second blast was just as strong. With a quick moment to breathe, Midoriya took to the air to get a better view of the ring. As he made his ascent, he was able to get a glance at Bakugo through the smoke. The two locked eyes for a second and he was about to use his quirk on him, but the explosion quirk user was quick to put up another smoke screen to obstruct his vision. Did he already figured out that I need to see him to be able to use my quirk, he wondered. You can't levitate what you can't see. Isn't that right, you loser? Bakugo's voice said from the smoke cloud. Unbeknownst to Midoriya, the boy had spent a good amount of time looking up information on telekinetic quirks before the match, and the fact that he was still able to move on his own was more than enough confirmation for him. Of course he'd figure it out. He's seen me fight twice already, Midoriya said to himself. He should have known better than to underestimate the guy. The verdant teen quickly decided to play the waiting game and ascended further into the air. He may not be able to see his opponent, but the same was also true for him. Sooner or later he'd get his chance. Bakugo, however, wasn't having any of it. For a short moment, enough of the smoke cloud dissipated to where Midoriya could see the boy's silhouette. He stuck out his hand to grab a hold of him, but another blast went off and obstructed his view. What happened next definitely caught him by surprise. From the middle of the smoke cloud, Bakugo used his quirk to propel himself upwards into the sky. With this window of opportunity, Midoriya yet again attempted to grab a hold of him, but the explosion quirk user quickly sent a blast his way. Out of instinct, Midoriya moved himself to the right to avoid the attack, but doing so cost him his chance at victory. In the time it took him to reorient himself, Bakugo was already back on the ground and had kicked up some more smoke. So you're trying to compete against me? Hey Deku, you think you can beat me? It doesn't matter if you got some shitty quirk now. You're still nothing. Just trash on the side of the road, a bug I can crush whenever I want, you damn loser, Bakugo's voice shouted from the ring. Midoriya had to bite back a tinge of anger after hearing this. He knew what the guy was trying to do. He was trying to agitate him and get him to lose focus. I hate you. What made you think you could even be here? Even after all this time you still haven't learned. Are you trying to humiliate me, hiding your quirk from me and pretending you're some kind of big shot? The boy's words were followed by a few indiscriminate blasts in multiple directions. At the very least, Bakugo didn't know where he was. Calm down, Izuku. He's just trying to get under your skin. Maybe I should tell your loser classmates just how pathetic you really are. I bet they would love to know that you're actually just a spineless wimp. One who decided to run away from his problems instead of facing them like a man. Is that where you've been all this time, tucked under some hole with your tail between your legs? How fitting for a worthless waste of space like you. Midoriya doesn't really know why, but something in his mind snapped after hearing that. Actually, he does know why, because it wasn't too far from the truth. But there was something about hearing those words come out of Bakugo's mouth that just made it an even more bitter pill to swallow. Midoriya wasn't someone who had ever learned how to process anger very well, or even at all. He had always experienced anger in small spurts, but he usually forced those feelings down as soon as they came up. Heroes never let their emotions get the better of them after all. But there was just something about what Bakugo said that struck a chord in him that he didn't even know he had. Everyone in the stadium watched as the boy visibly relaxed his body in midair. For a moment, he was sent back in time and years of his life flashed across his mind. The bullying, the beatings, the apathetic looks, the burned clothes and bruises. All of that contributed to what was probably going to be a major mistake further down the road. All of a sudden, the boy's mind went clear. It was as if everything in the world suddenly didn't matter. Midoriya turned his gaze back down to the dissipating cloud of smoke, and the opportunity that he had been waiting on presented itself on a silver platter. It was quick, only for a second, but he got a glance at his opponent. More accurately, Bakugo's completely exposed back. Come down here and face me, you mother act. Bakugo's tirade was cut off when he felt something wrap around his throat. The boy reached his hands up to deal with what was now constricting his airflow, but there was one problem. Nothing was there. The next thing the explosion quirk user felt was his body being lifted off of the ground and rotate nearly a full 180 degrees before being forced out of cloud. The boy managed to look up, and when he did, he admittedly felt a tinge of something that he had experienced only once before. There in the air was Midoriya, with an arm extended towards him and his hand mimicking the shape of a vice grip. What was more unnerving was the expression of absolute calm on the boy's face. Bakugo absent-mindedly tried to talk, but that only worsened his current predicament. His throat was being crushed, he was losing air fast, and he could hear the rushing through his head. It was at this moment that ashen blonde teen finally realized what he was feeling. It was fear. Fear brought on by someone that he should have had no problem putting in their place. The explosion quirk user looked up once again towards his foe and tried to figure a way to get himself out of this before he passed out. On the flip side, Midoriya's mind had gone blank. All of the emotions that he was feeling had bubbled over and he wasn't thinking straight. It was only when he looked into Bakugo's shot and bulging eyes that he finally came to his senses. What was he doing? What in the actual hell was he doing? He was using his quirk to cause harm to another student. Immediately the boy released his hold and Bakugo hit the ground with a thud, only for the boy to immediately suck in as much oxygen as he could through his mouth. In the air, Midoriya's mind was racing. His head was throbbing, his heart was ready to leap out of his chest, and he could feel himself ready to throw up at a moment's notice. Without a second thought, the green-haired teen lowered himself to the ground and quickly turned on his heels, not even caring that he technically just lost the fight. His brain was still foggy and he needed to find a bathroom quick before he spilled his guts all over the place. Izuku, Midoriya has forfeited. Katsuki, Bakugo is the winner, Midnight said in a confused tone as she watched the boy leave without a word. Back with Bakugo, once the words finally hit his ears, he immediately looked up to see Midoriya retreating into the tunnel. His mind was also processing things at lightning speed. He just gave up. That useless loser just gave up in the middle of the fight. Useless Deku just forfeited the match when he was about to win. Bakugo was having a hard time coming to terms with something so ludicrous. Did Deku of all people think that he was so weak that he needed his pity? Was this his way of sending a message? If it wasn't for the fact that his throat was still in pain, he would have shouted at the boy before he disappeared into the tunnel. One thing was certain in Katsuki Bakugo's mind at that very moment. Deku was going to pay for making a fool out of him. In the 1B section, the students let the initial shock of what they just witnessed wash over them. Damn, Away simply said. Dude, Midoriya's intense. Suburaba followed up. It took Takage a second to shake herself off before speaking up. Were any of you able to hear what Bakugo said to him? Even though he was yelling, I could barely make out what he was saying. All I was able to make out was something about Midoriya-kun being a wimp. Yanagi answered in her usual dry tone. I think it's safe to say that is definitely not the case. Tamakiri commented. Without warning, Takage stood up from her seat and went straight for the exit. Something was definitely wrong, she could feel it. The entire time during their fight, Bakugo was the only one talking. Which means that he must have said something outrageous to get Midoriya to choke him out on national television like that. Where are you going? Tetsu asked. I'm going to go find Mop Top and see if he's okay. Do you want us to come with you? Shiozaki looked to the girl. She herself was worried about her classmates' well-being. The boy looked very distressed as he left the ring. No, I think I should go by myself. We'll be back in a bit. She waved her off. Can you guys not be a bunch of asshole when we do? Everyone in the booth nodded in agreement. Blizzard Hero Agency, Saitama Prefecture. Well shit, Ozhana said in a slightly bewildered tone. This Midoriya dude is one bad motherer. That Bakugo kid must have said something crazy to him and all that smoke. I wish they had microphones inside the ring. To her right, Fubuki's eyes lingered on television screen. The woman had been silent since the match ended. Interesting. What's up? That was a forced joke. The green-haired woman simply answered. What Ozhana gave her an inquisitive look. A very difficult move to pull off. She began explaining. Very few people with a quirk like mine can do it without snapping a person's neck. It takes a ridiculous amount of precision and control. The only people I know who can do it safely are myself and my sister. So are you still going to take him on as an intern? Of course I am. Like I said before, you don't come across talent like that very often. In a seedy bar in the bowels of Kamino Ward, a young man with dry skin and sky blue hair was grinning at the television screen in front of him. Kurajiri, he said in a raspy voice to a well-dressed, human-shaped cloud of mist. I want him. The boy does seem to possess an affinity for the wicked. The man now identified as Kurajiri responded before turning his attention to the other television monitor on the back wall. What do you think, Master? I think that Tamura has a wonderful eye for talent. A sinister voice stated from behind the screen, although neither of the two men in the bar could see it. The man behind the television was very pleased at this turn of events. A few minutes went by as Takage made her way down to the waiting rooms. She was a bit sad that she was probably going to miss Kendu's match, but there were more important things to worry about right now. About halfway down the hall, she noticed a cracked door on her left. The girl let out a sigh before opening it and was met with the sight of Midoriya sitting in one of the chairs with his head in his hands. It didn't take a genius to see that the boy wasn't in the best of moods right now, and part of her knew that she should probably leave him alone. But the other part won out. You okay, Mop Top? She asked in a delicate tone. Takage-san. Midoriya looked up at her. He was about to say something else, but the girl held up her hand to cut him off. Before you say anything, everyone in the class heard that dude yelling at you. We couldn't hear exactly what he was saying, but it must have been pretty bad if it made you of all people lose your cool. I'm sorry. He apologized, more out of habit than anything else. What are you apologizing to me for? The boy decided to stay silent instead of giving her an answer. The two remained in that position for a few seconds before the girl took the open seat across the table from him. So, I know this is none of my business. Takage started. But what's the deal between you and that Bakugo guy? He seems to hate you, like a lot. It's complicated. He answered her in a slightly dejected tone. I wouldn't doubt it. Look, if you don't want to tell anyone, that's fine. But it's not good to bottle things up if they're bothering you. Yeah, I know. The silence between them lingered for another 2 minutes before Takage decided to do something about it. It probably wasn't good for the guy to be by himself right now, so it was her job to try to cheer up her friend. Alright, that's enough sulking, let's go, she said while standing up. Go where? First, to that smoothie stand near the cafeteria. Then back to the class. Hitsuka's match is about to start and we need to be there to cheer her on. Though, he simply said. The boy knew that he probably shouldn't be left alone right now, but a part of him had more than enough reason to be nervous about facing the rest of the class. He didn't really know what they thought of him before, and no doubt their opinion of him just worsened. Actually, I'd rather just stay here for a few more minutes. That's fine, the girl responded as she sat back down. Honestly, she should have known better than to try and force him to return to their group so quickly, but she wasn't really experienced in this kind of thing. The two remained there for a few minutes before Midoriya finally calmed himself down enough to be able to go back to his classmates. Thankfully for the green-haired boy, no one pressed him about what happened during his match. It was pretty obvious to them that Bakugo had to have said something pretty extreme during their fight, but what that was exactly was none of their business. Instead, the students of 1B decided to cheer on their class rep. The second semifinal match between Kendo and Shinsu was a bit of a disappointment for the students of Class 1B. Once again, Shinsu recorded another effortless victory after Kendo forfeited her match against her will. As expected, the girl was pretty upset about falling victim to this guy's quirk for a second time, but there was nothing that she could do about it. And with that, every member of Class 1B was out of the tournament. I think I've finally figured out this guy's quirk. Monoma spoke up. You think so? Well, spill man, what the hell is this guy's deal? And now very curious Tetsu asked. I think it's voice activated. He started. In every one of his matches, he said something to his opponent before they began. It's a shot in the dark, but if that's the criteria for him to use his quirk, it's a smart way to do it without tipping anyone off. I think he's right. Midoriya silently agreed. Damn, if only we knew that before the start of the tournament we could have put him down. The guy's built like a twig. I bet he'd go down with one good punch. Well, there's nothing we can do about it now. Takage shrugged. At least Mop Top and Itsuka tied for third place. I'm calling it now. Bakugo's gonna win. Honuki flatly stated. No one else found enough reason to disagree. The final match of the tournament went just like Honuki predicted. Upon entering the ring, Midoriya noticed the absolutely furious aura surrounding Bakugo. The students of 1B watched as Shinsu tried another attempt at taunting the boy from 1A. but you could see the nervous sweat form on the purple-haired boy's face when he didn't respond. No one could tell if Bakugo had figured out the boy's quirk or if he was just too angry to talk, but it became apparent that Monoma's assumption might have some merit. The match started and ended with Bakugo blasting the general studies student out of the ring with one decisive attack. Simply put, Shinsu didn't even stand a chance. In no time, Midoriya and Kendo were ushered to the podium to accept their third-place medals. Although both students were satisfied with their placement, there was still a lingering sense of disappointment in the air. Kendo was kicking herself for falling prey to her opponent's quirk twice, and Midoriya was still a bit distraught with how his own match ended. Actually, the only person who seemed somewhat happy was Shinsu. However, neither student could really focus all that well seeing as Bakugo was in the middle of throwing a fit. The boy was literally chained to a cement pillar that Cementos had to make, and his hands were bound together with some heavy metal cuffs, and his eyes were focused on nothing but Midoriya. "You know, you should be the one up there," Kendo whispered to her classmate. "I heard from Setsuna and Yanagichin about what happened during your match." "It's fine, Kendo-san," Midoriya told the girl with a half-hearted smile. Before the girl could respond, the voice of Midnight came on over the loudspeaker and their podiums began ascending onto the parade field. As expected, everyone was more than a bit uncomfortable seeing their new champion thrashing around in such a state. Some of the spectators couldn't help but comment on how the boy looked like a feral animal. "Geez, Aizawa, is he always like this?" Ken asked his fellow teacher. "More or less," the bandaged man responded. "And you haven't done anything about it yet. The kid seems off his rocker. Bakugo may be rough around the edges, but he gets results when it matters. As long as he doesn't do anything egregious, I don't really see a point in trying to adjust his behavior right now." "Well, that just seems irresponsible," Ken absent-mindedly responded. The nighttime hero quirked an exposed eyebrow at his colleague's words. "Excuse me, forgive me, that was unprofessional." The white-haired man quickly apologized. "You've been doing this a lot longer than I have, so I'm sure you know how to handle these kinds of things. Now, let's break out the hardware." Midnight began while motioning towards the sky. "Of course, there's only one man worthy of distributing these awards." Out of nowhere, the sound of boisterous laughter caught everyone's attention. And like a muscle-bound angel descending from the heavens, All Might made his grand entrance. Unfortunately for the number one hero, Midnight completely screwed up his introduction. The R-rated heroine quickly apologized by holding her hands up in front of her face. The blonde-haired man wasted no time in securing the medals and making his way over to the podium. And his first stop were the two third-place finalists from 1B. "Young Kendo, congratulations. You showed great strength befitting that of a class representative." "Thank you, Sensei. But to be honest, I feel like I could have done a lot better," the orange-haired teen responded as the medal was placed around her neck. "Take these experiences to heart and use them to overcome your own shortcomings. From what I've seen, a lot of students in your class look up to you." Next up was Midoriya. As the pro hero placed the other bronze medal around his neck, he couldn't help but notice the odd gaze that the boy was giving him. Obviously, this was something that he needed to address sometime soon. But now was neither the time nor the place for it. Instead, he opted to keep to the script and give the boy his praise. "Young Midoriya, you certainly made an impression on everyone here. A lot of people had you as their favorite to win the tournament. I'd like to commend you for focusing on teamwork rather than chasing the glory of being in the top spot. It's a trait that many aspiring heroes like yourself should possess." "Thank you, Sensei," the boy dryly stated as he accepted his prize, his tone of voice not sitting well with the blonde-haired man at all. Shinsu was next on the pecking order. The purple-haired teen made no attempt to hide the smug grin on his face as the silver medal was given to him. "Young Shinsu, I think I speak for everyone here when I say that you were certainly the Cinderella story of this tournament. Your quirk is truly impressive and you managed to make your mark on both the spectators and the faculty. Expect to see me in your class very soon," the boy responded. Finally, was Katsuki Bakugo. Even All Might had to take a moment to admire his colleague's handiwork. He was fairly certain that the restraints the boy was placed under were meant for highly dangerous criminals, not a high school student. But instead of pointing that out, he decided to just roll with it. Against his better judgment, he loosened the muzzle around the boy's mouth. "Well, young Bakugo, you did exactly what you said you would in the pledge. You are true to your word." "All Might," Bakugo growled out towards the man. "Winning first place like this is useless. It doesn't prove that I'm the best one here. Even if the whole damn world recognizes me as the winner, I refuse to accept like this," he said before turning his attention to Midoriya. "I didn't even get a chance to face off with that half-and-half bastard. And worse, shitty Deku thinks he can get away with forfeiting our match and making me look like a fool. You hear me, Deku? I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this isn't over. You're not better than me, damn it. And I will make sure that I prove it, you and everyone here. This guy is psychotic." Inagi whispered to Takage, who quickly nodded her head in agreement. "We should probably end this sooner rather than later," All Might thought before letting out a subtle cough. The pro hero attempted to place the gold medal around the boy's neck, but he refused to take it. Instead, he decided to just put it between his teeth and be done with it. With one final speech to the crowd, and a massive miscue that ended up being replayed for the rest of the day, All Might gave a close to the festivities, giving the students the chance to return to their class and wait to be dismissed. Back at the 1B classroom, Ken was giving his students the final word of the day. Congratulations on your performance today. Seeing as the second and third year sports festivals will span the rest of the week, the principal has decided to give you a 4-day weekend. Hell yeah, Hiatus and Ibara high-fived each other at this news. We've already received quite a few offers from pros who want to recruit some of you, but you'll have to wait until Monday to receive the final draft. Until then, use this time to recuperate and reflect on your performance today. Have fun. Without missing a beat, the students began making their way home. Midoriya didn't even get a chance to make it out of the front gate before he felt a tap on his shoulder. The boy turned around only to see Takage standing with her hands behind her back and a sharp grin on her face. So Mop Top, we still on for this weekend? Huh, we're hanging out this weekend. Don't you remember? Oh no, did you not want to spend some time with me? The girl teased as placed her hand over her chest in mock offense. You're gonna leave a beautiful young lady such as myself to weather this 4-day weekend all by lonesome? How shameful. Izuku Midoriya. You don't really know how to respond to that. You can respond by giving me an answer. She shot back jokingly. I mean, I was really looking forward to spending some time together. But if you're too good for me, I understand. Midoriya was about to say something, but his mind flashed back to a conversation that he had with his mother a few days ago. Actually, it was a conversation that the two of them had more than a few times ever since school started. Izuku, I know this is still a sore topic for you, but can you at least try and make some friends this year? The boy looked at his classmate and pondered for a moment. He really had no clue if the girl was genuine about her request or not. But his mother wouldn't have been happy if she ever found out that he was actively avoiding interacting with other students. On top of that, Takage had only been nice to him so far, so denying her request would have come off as rude. The duo stood in silence for a few more seconds before Midoriya let out a sigh. I'll be in Saitama this Friday. I'm busy in the morning, but I'll be free that afternoon. He whispered out with a tinge of redness on his cheeks. Takage's face almost lit up with excitement after hearing that. Awesome, it's a not date. A WW what? A not date? She repeated. You know, a totally platonic outing between buddies that's totally not a date but technically is. The green-haired boy's redness intensified after hearing this, which only caused the girl burst out in a fit of laughter, apparently getting him flustered with some sort of hobby for her. Well, I look forward to seeing you this weekend, Mop Top. The two of us are going to have a blast. She gave him one final pat on the shoulder before heading off towards the train station, leaving Midoriya to process her previous statement. What did I just get myself into? While the rest of her classmates were surely enjoying a nice breakfast with their families, Takage woke up Friday morning to an empty house. As it turns out, her father had to pull another all-nighter at his lab and wouldn't be back until later that evening. This would make 2 days in a row that the man was gone before she even got out of bed that morning. But as much as she wanted to be upset about the stunning lack of human interaction outside of school, she knew that his work was important and that she didn't really have a right to be angry. Things had been even more quiet in the Takage house ever since her sister left for school. But the fact that she no longer had to share a bathroom with the woman was one of the few benefits her absence brought. As the green-haired girl got to work making herself breakfast, she couldn't help but look forward to her afternoon outing with her classmate. Normally she would head over to Tetsu's house and pester the silver-haired boy until he finally gave in and went out with her. But seeing as he was away visiting family, she really had nothing else to do. Once she was done preparing her eggs, rice and leftover salmon, the green-haired girl plopped down onto her couch and turned on the television. The added benefit of being home on a weekday meant that she got to enjoy some of the early morning documentaries on the Nature Channel. And as luck would have it, there was a special on the late Cretaceous period. Takage doesn't really know what sparked her fascination with all things reptile in her childhood, but she always found herself entranced at learning new and exciting things about all different types of lizards and creepycrawlies. If she was being honest, if the girl wasn't so dead set on becoming a hero, she could definitely see herself becoming a herpetologist in the future. Halfway through the program, Takage decided to pull out her phone and shoot a text over to her fellow green-haired companion to see if they were still on for today. T-Rex, what time do you want to meet up? Rabbit, whenever is good for you. T-Rex 14-0. Rabbit, that's fine. T-Rex, sweet, how about we meet up at the shopping center? Rabbit, that's fine. T-Rex, cool, I'll be sure to wear something cute so people get jealous when they see us together. Rabbit, that's fine. T-Rex, you really need to work on your texting skills. Rabbit, I'm sorry. T-Rex, and that bad habit of yours. Rabbit, I know. T-Rex, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question? Rabbit, sure. T-Rex, why is your icon a rabbit? Is that your favorite animal? Rabbit, I just picked it random. T-Rex, really, that's kind of lame. T-Rex, I was expecting something more profound. Rabbit, I don't know how to respond to that. T-Rex, you're too cute. I'll see you later. Meet me at the water fountain next to the food court. I'm really looking forward to our not date. Rabbit, I'll see you later, Takage-san. 4 hours later, Takage found herself waiting in front of the aforementioned water fountain. It was 10 minutes past their scheduled meet-up time and Midoriya was nowhere to be found. The boy seemed like the punctual type, so she definitely found it odd that he was running late. And the fact that he didn't send her a warning text was kind of annoying. but she assumed that he had a good reason for his tardiness. The girl was dressed in a simple black t-shirt with a picture of a velociraptor on it, some green shorts and a pair of black sneakers. It was a lot more casual than what she was used to wearing, but the springtime heat was pretty unforgiving when it came to fashion. How Kayama managed to wear such heavy sweaters and clothing all year round when she was off duty was a complete mystery to her. But when people recognize you as the R-rated heroine, it made sense to cover up to avoid getting spotted. Another few minutes passed before a familiar voice called out to her from across the walkway. The girl turned her attention to where the sound came from and was met with the sight of her partner for the day. The boy in question was dressed in the same red sneakers that he wore to school every day, some khaki shorts and a white t-shirt with the word business casual written in katakana letters on it. Evidently, his Joe Smo persona didn't just apply to his hero uniform. However, the one weird part of his ensemble that Takagi was curious about was the backpack that he was currently carrying with him. "Hey Mop Top, what took you so long? I was beginning to think that you stood me up." The girl greeted with a kind smile. "I'm sorry, I kinda lost track of time." Midoriya quickly apologized. "No worries." She casually waved off. "So what's with the bag? Are we studying today or something?" "Oh, no. I was helping at the orphanage again." "Oh yeah, you did say something about that the last time we hung out. So what do you do over there anyway?" "I pretty much just help tutor some of the kids there. It's really nothing major." "Yup, you're definitely made of puppies and sunshine." The girl joked before wrapping her arms around his and leading him to the food court. "Where are we going?" a now red-faced Midoriya nervously asked while trying not to focus on the sudden contact. "First to go get some food, then to enjoy the rest of our not date," she said nonchalantly while pointing over to a small pastry stand a bit further down the walkway. Within minutes the duo were sitting down and enjoying their food. Both teens ended up settling on splitting an order of strawberry daifuku. Midoriya wasn't really one for sweets, but he had to admit that the treat was rather refreshing. "So Mop Top, tell me a bit about yourself." Takagi started after taking a sip of her green tea. "I think out of everyone in class, you're the one people know the least about." "Well, aside from Kodai T, there's really not much to tell." The boy slightly stuttered out. If he was being honest, he preferred it if classmates didn't know too much about him. The last thing he needed was for certain things to come back to light. "I'm actually a pretty boring person." "Yeah, I doubt that," the girl retorted. Come on dude, you're like the strongest one in our class. We all know that you're pretty smart, you speak damn near perfect English, and you spend your free time helping out the less fortunate. Boring isn't really a good word for you." What about you?" Takagi, the telekinesis user deflected. "Well, what would you like to know?" Takagi leaned back in her seat with a grin. "Ask away, I'm an open book." "Oh, well." Midoriya hesitated for a moment while he racked his brain. Is this what normal conversations were like? He really had no frame of reference when it came to sort of thing. What was a good question that didn't come off as rude or too invasive? Maybe he'd just stick with something simple. "What do you like to do for fun?" "Oh," the boy nodded. "All right, my turn," the girl cheered while clapping her hands together. "What's your favorite food?" "Katsudon," he replied without missing a beat. "Oh, that's a good one. I'm more of a yakitori girl." "That's nice. Okay, do you mind if I ask you something else even if it's your turn?" "Yes, sure." "Have you always been such a loner?" she inquired. Even though it was an innocent question, Midoriya couldn't help but pause after hearing it. Sure, it was no secret that he wasn't the most social person in the world. But hearing it said out loud was kind of weird. "I mean, you don't really talk a lot, and this is pretty much the first time that you've chosen to hang out with someone outside of class. If you don't count that time during the first week of school." The girl continued before taking a quick bite of her daifuku. "So what gives? Have you always been such a lone wolf?" Guess you could say that," he nervously responded. A silence fell over them as Takagi gave him a curious look. Obviously there was something more to it than just not being a people person. But it was pretty clear to the girl that they were stepping into uncomfortable territory for the boy. So instead of pressing on any further, she decided to drop the subject altogether. "All right, Mop Top, on to our next destination." "And where is that?" Of all the places that Midoriya expected his classmate to take him, a museum was definitely not on the list. The boy had never been to one in person before, so this was going to be an entirely new experience for him. "You're gonna love this place," Takagi told him with a smile. "Why is that?" "Because they just opened up a new exhibit on the Jurassic period. Plus, students get in for 75% off, so it's super cheap." "Wow," was all the boy managed to say before Takagi once again grabbed him by the arm and pulled him inside. Overall, the boy rather enjoyed this impromptu field trip. He'll be the first to admit that he knew next to nothing about dinosaurs, so learning all of this new information about them was rather fun. However, what he did find interesting was his partner's seemingly endless knowledge about the subject. It didn't even take 5 minutes before the girl started listing off random facts about some of the displays and skeletons that lined the inside of the exhibit. And it became very apparent that this was some sort of hobby of hers. And this is the Stegosaurus. It's probably the most recognizable creature from this time period aside from the Brachiosaurus. Contrary to popular belief, they were actually herbivores, the girl explained while pointing to the massive skeleton in front of them. "You sure do know a lot about this stuff, Takagi." Sure do. I've liked learning about this stuff ever since I was a kid. Midoriya took this time to ask the girl a question that had been on his mind for a while now. So does your family primarily have reptilian quirks? It seems to be a pretty big theme for you. No, the girl answered. No one in my family has any of the sort that I know of. I pretty much named my quirk Lizard Tail Splitter because some type of reptiles can regrow lost limbs. Kind of like me. That makes sense. What about you? The girl inquired. Not to sound rude, but telekinesis is a pretty bland name. Even Yanagi calls hers poltergeist despite it being the same thing. Midoriya couldn't help but blush at the girl's comment. He was never the most creative when it came to naming things, and even he would have to admit that calling his quirk telekinesis was rather boring. It just seemed appropriate. Makes sense. Takagi gave him a nonchalant shrug. Another 30 minutes went by before the duo decided to call it quits on the exhibit. It was getting rather late, and even though they were off from school, it was best to get a head start on avoiding the madness that came with a Friday evening. Unlike UA, most schools were getting out at about this time. The two students ended up rounding back towards the shopping center before parting ways. Overall, Takagi enjoyed the midday outing with her classmate, and she was thankful that she had something to do other than wasting away on her couch. Granted, she did want to spend a bit more time hanging out with him, but it wasn't a good idea to push her luck. I had fun today, Mop Top. We should do this again sometime. Alright, Midoriya blushed. Maybe next time we can invite the others and do a group thing. That sounds like a good idea. Or it could just be the two of us again. Takagi wiggled her eyebrows in a suggestive manner, causing the boy's face to darken into an even deeper shade of red. Man, you're too easy. Will see you at school, Takagi-san, he replied after pulling himself together. You sure will. She shot him a thumbs up before turning on her heels and making the journey back home, leaving him to make his own way to the train station back to Musutafu. And with that, their date came to a close. It didn't take long for Takagi to return home. Her father wasn't due back until well after sundown, so she still had the house all to herself. The girl had planned on getting a head start on dinner and finishing up the rest of her homework, but that pretty much went out the window when she was met with the sight of her older sister sitting on the living room couch with a giant bowl of pretzels in her lap. What's up, Runt? The elder Takagi's daughter greeted her with a lazy wave, before taking another bite of her snack. Nietzsche and Takagi paused while giving her a curious look. What the hell are you doing here? I still technically live here, you know. The woman shot back with a toothy grin. Nano Takagi, age 19. A woman of average height with dark green eyes and short, dark green hair styled in a pixie cut. She's currently attending school in Tokyo in pursuit of a degree in psychology. I get that, but why are you here? I have the next few days off from class and wanted to surprise you, she smiled before holding up a bag of pretzels. Also, I came to restock Dad's supply. Oh, the younger Takagi's daughter gave her an unimpressed glare. What's with that look? What? I can't congratulate my little sister on doing well in her first ever sports festival. I almost skipped class to watch you fight in the tournament. Really? Of course, Nana told her. Sucks that you got put up against that dude with the brainwashing quirk. If it wasn't for him, you probably would have made it to the finals. Yeah, well, we were finally able to figure out his quirk. So if I ever have to go up against him again, I'll be more than ready. Takagi took a moment to take off her shoes and drop herself onto the couch next to her sister. The girl couldn't help the tired sigh that escaped her mouth as she sunk into the cushions. It was only then that she realized that she had been on her feet for the last few hours. So where were you all day? I came back a little after noon and you were nowhere to be found. The short-haired woman asked. I was hanging out with a buddy from school. Who? Tetsu? No. Takagi shook her head. A guy in my class named Midoriya. If Takagi was looking in her direction, she would have noticed a slight glimmer appear in Nanao's eyes at this new bit of information. Oh, the dude with telekinesis quirk. The one that choked out that blonde kid before throwing the match. Yeah, watching that was pretty crazy. No kidding, Takagi retorted. But if you ask me, Bakugo had it coming to him. The guy's a total douchebag. There was a brief silence between the two before Nanao decided to lighten up the mood. Much like her aunt and sister, the woman had an affinity for taking interests in certain things. And when faced with the topic of her little sister's possible love life, she just couldn't leave that alone. So what, you two went out on a date or something? The woman said with a devious smirk. No. It was a not date. Just a casual outing between two classmates. Takagi folded her arms in defiance at the obvious attempt to prod into her social life. Oh, so he's available then? Maybe I should ask Aunt Nimuri for his contact info. I could use a powerful young stud who can carry my luggage around while I go shopping. Aren't you a little too old to be hitting on high school students? Hey, the age of consent is 13. Plus, you need to grab them while they're young and full of potential. Nana said with a not-so-subtle chuckle. Come on, be a good little sister and set me up. Are you gonna be here all weekend? The younger Takagi's daughter quickly changed subjects. Until tomorrow night. Also, I haven't been to a family dinner in a while and I'm tired of living off ramen and scrambled eggs. What time are Dad and Aunt Nimuri supposed to be here? Aunt Nimuri said she'll be here in a few hours. Last time I texted her and Dad's gonna be home late. Again, the girl said in a slightly annoyed tone. Nana was quick to pick up on this and couldn't help the small frown that appeared on her face. She was aware that the girl wasn't exactly a fan of their father working so late all the time. But considering how demanding his job was, it was to be expected. She also knew it had to be pretty lonely around here now that she was away at school. But things like that were to be expected. Look, Setsuna. She placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. I know it has to be pretty dull around here nowadays, but you can't really hold it against him. Takagi was silent for a few seconds before letting out a sigh. I know getting upset about it is super childish and selfish, but it would be nice for him to at least be here every once in a while. I practically live here by myself most days. I mean, I haven't even seen him since Wednesday. Hey, I get it. Nano rubbed her back in a caring manner before standing up and stretching herself out. How about after dinner the two of us vent our frustrations out over some ice cream and sappy romance movies that usually cheers you up right? Takagi looked at the woman for a moment before giving her a smile. Instead of being upset about things she really couldn't control, she was going to appreciate the fact that she wasn't going to spend another night all by herself. Fine, just as long as it's not another one of those cheesy ones where everyone has vampirism quirks. Well, excuse me for having good taste. While the two sisters were putting the finishing touches on dinner preparations, Midoriya was just stepping back into his apartment. The boy didn't even get 3 steps into the door before the sound of his mother's voice caught his attention. Izuku, is that you, sweetie? And Ko asked in a slightly worried tone. Yeah, he responded. What took you so long getting back? I know that you said that we're working at the orphanage again, but you're usually never out this late. In that moment it finally occurred to the boy that he completely forgot to tell his mother that he was going to be out longer than usual. He paused for a second before giving her an answer though. On one hand, the woman would be ecstatic to know that he was spending time with a classmate, but on the other, he didn't want to get her hopes up. So instead, he decided to just meet somewhere in the middle. Sorry, tutoring took a bit longer than I expected and I ended up bumping into someone from my class. Sorry, I forgot to tell you, he told with a half-hearted grin. Oh, alright then, Hinko responded. Even though she wasn't going to outright say it, the woman had a feeling that he wasn't being completely honest. Despite this, she decided to just roll with it. You know, I get worried whenever you're gone for too long. In the future, can you please do a better job at letting me know where you are? Sorry, Mom, I'll make it sure it doesn't happen again. Fine, the woman relented. Well, I already finished making dinner. Your food's in the microwave whenever you get hungry. Thanks, I'll eat it later after I take a quick nap, he told her before disappearing into his room for the night, leaving Inko to watch the highlights of the third-year sports festival by herself.